If I could have everybody's attention, please. Have everybody's attention, please. Hey, Dennis. For those of you who are unable to get a seat, we have seating in room 515 in this building, and there'll be a live feed into that room on the cameras. If anybody wants to go there to watch this, and if you want to come back over here and have something to say, you still can get back, but you can see it live over there. I'm Roger Lane, and I'm chairman of the Reapportionment Committee. I want to welcome everybody here. This is the best crowd we've had for one of these, and it's good to see everybody. Must be something interesting going on today. To get us started, I'd like to call on Representative Jurgensen to lead us in prayer before we get started.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for everyone being here. We ask that you give this committee wisdom in making our decisions as we go forward. We ask that you bless each and every one in this room and in the state of Georgia. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody. Before we get started, one of our distinguished members of this committee, who's also served as chairman of the committee before I was delegated that duty, passed away the last few weeks, Bobby Franklin, and I'd like for us to honor Bobby with just a moment of silence before we get started, if you would, please. Thank you. Thanks. I'd also like to welcome our new member, Earl Earhart, who's from Cobb County, seated down at the end here. For the members up here, we do have a court reporter, and so when you sign in to speak or buzz in to speak, be sure you give your name and where you're from to the court reporter so that she can keep up with who's doing the talking. And someone reminded me of that, and makes a bad transcript if you don't know who's saying what. We do have a sign-in sheet. I hope all of you had an opportunity. We have some signed in. If anybody has come in since we got started who would like to sign in, we'd be glad to have you sign in, and we'll try to get to everybody that we can today during this hearing. I would like to introduce some of the folks who are helping us with this. Our legislative counsel is Jeff Lanier. Jeff's over here in the corner. From the Attorney General's office, Dennis Dunn, I believe, is here. Thanks. Good to see you, Dennis. I think, is there anybody here from the Reapportionment office? The whole staff. Jimmy McDonald. Anybody else with your office?
I'm here.
Dan O'Connor. And while we're talking about those, all of the House members and probably a lot of the public has dealt with these folks in the Reapportionment office, and they have done a fantastic job of working with all of us to help draw our districts and to draw the state fair districts based upon input from all of us. And I'd like to give them a hand for the number of months and weeks and days and hours that they put in on this project that we're going to be discussing today. So let's give them a hand. Then the real important person who's here is my administrative assistant, Misty Downing. Where's Misty? Give her a hand. She has to put up with me and a lot of other folks during this process, and she's done a fantastic job too. And then our committee aide is Jeremy Betts. Jeremy. What you got? Okay. We're putting the sign-up sheet back out there since folks have come in that want to sign up. I think we'll start this meeting. The first item on the agenda is there someone here from the Secretary of State's office that wants to make a presentation to us? Is there anybody here from the Secretary of State's office? Okay, Okay, they had requested to be on the agenda to speak about how reapportionment and redistricting affected their office, but they're not here. So I guess at this time we'll call the next item on the agenda, which is HB1EX, which is our plan for redistricting the State House districts in Georgia. I'm going to relinquish the chair to Vice Chairman Matt Ramsey, and I'll come down here to present the bill to the committee.
We're going to hear from the chairman and let him run through his entire presentation. Then we'll take questions after the chairman's presentation is over. I want to make sure I have the right mic button on for the. Is your light on down there, Mr. Chairman?
Light's on. Can you hear me?
Is everybody out there?
Can everybody out there hear me?
That's it. Okay.
Anybody doesn't want to hear.
Chairman Lane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to bring HB1EX to you for your consideration. There's been countless months and weeks and days and hours spent putting together the map that y'all have already seen, that we put on the internet, that everybody's had an opportunity to see and discuss. And a lot of everybody on this committee had a fingerprint on that map. I think everybody on the committee came in and discussed the districts and the communities of interest within their districts and within their counties, and so this is a collaborative effort of all of us. This is not my map. This is not any one particular person's map. This is our map, the legislature's map, that was put together with everybody being involved in it. A little bit about the process. I'm proud of the process that we had for getting to this point. We started out early in the year with setting up public hearings around the state. We had an open process in deciding where we were going to meet, when we were going to meet around the state. And after getting input from members of the Georgia General Assembly, everybody had an opportunity to help us in arriving at those locations and where we were going to have them, and when we were going to have them. This committee met and discussed those locations, and we voted unanimously to go to the 12 sites that we selected. We did that through May and June. And this committee was tremendous in attendance at those meetings. I think just looking around the room, everybody on the committee went to just about every meeting. I mean, it was tremendous, and that's very important, I think, to the public who showed up at those meetings, and to us as members of this committee, to get that input from the public as to what they wanted in their districts, what they wanted in their part of the state, what they wanted statewide. All of those meetings were recorded and put on the internet for the folks who couldn't get to those meetings to go on our website and to listen to what went on, and to also from the website be able to make inquiries and additional input into our process. After we finished that, we started, maps were starting to be, some work was going to get the data, the census data, into the computers and get it in shape that we could start looking at different scenarios for drawing maps and to get us to this point where we are today. And in that process, as I said, we have invited every member of this legislature, not just Republicans, but Democrats and Republicans, because that's what Georgians wanted us to do. Georgians expect us to draw these maps together and in a way that is fair and sensible and legal for all Georgians. And that's what we tried to do in this process. We being as chairman of this committee, I've been here since pretty nonstop since the end of June, meeting with just about every member that's here, and looking at their districts with them and their areas and getting input from them as to what the communities of interest are in their areas that we need to consider in finalizing our districts. That doesn't mean that we did everything that everybody wanted, because it's impossible, because we have to draw 180 districts. But we did seek that input and got that input and made a lot of significant changes to the maps as a result of that. And as a result of all that input and the process that we've used, the maps that have been proposed for this legislature and for us to adopt are the most fair, sensible, constitutional maps that we could draw with the input that we had from everybody in this legislature. The process we used was the most open, transparent process that Georgia has ever seen, and I'm proud of that. I think that's what the people expect, and that's what we did. This process was open to the public. We put it out on the internet, everything that we've done through the process as far as the hearings and the meetings, and we've come up with the most fair maps that we could. And even after we got the maps finally put into a statewide form last week, we published those Friday, put them on the internet, released them to the public on Friday of last week, which is the first time I'm aware of in Georgia history that legislators and citizens have had an opportunity to see what we're proposing as maps and redistricting of the state of Georgia. That's the first time that's ever been done before the sessions got started. And I think we should all be proud of that we did that. And that gives everybody a chance, and I'm sure it has helped people who've come here today to speak to our committee. It's helped them because they've had an opportunity to look at those maps and review those maps and be ready to come and ask intelligent questions as a result of looking at that, and give us some more input today on what the public thinks of those maps. So that I'm also proud of our committee for doing that and for getting the information out there before we got here today. Now let's talk about, we've got the maps around the room, and there's also some, I think, on the easel outside of the 180 districts as we propose them. We also have packets with the maps and the data with them. I assume that the public's had access to those. The folks who are here have access to those packets. Is that right, Ms. Downing? Yeah. Let's make them available so everybody will have them as we talk about them. Oh, no power. Everybody hang on, we ran out of power. I blew a fuse. I think all the members have that packet in your folders in front of you there. Solved? Was I going too fast? I was trying to be slow. Okay. All right. In putting together these maps, there are a couple of legal requirements that these districts in the statewide map has to meet. One of those is the Voting Rights Act, and our districts have to comply, that we are submitting, changing to the new ones that we're doing, have to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act. That act basically provides that we cannot retrogress in our majority-minority districts, that we have to maintain the majority-minority districts that we have based upon the current districts and based upon the 2010 census data. And we determined in this process that there are 49 districts that now qualify as being majority-minority districts. And to not retrogress means that we have to maintain those 49 districts if we can. And we put a lot of work into looking at the demographics all over the state to see if we could create and maintain 49 majority and minority districts, and we could. And this map reflects that we did meet our benchmark of 49 voting rights districts. And if you can do that, then of course the law requires you to do that, and we have in this plan. The other component of the legal requirement for redistricting is U.S. Constitution. Due process requires that each district be about equal population, one person, one vote. That everybody's vote in one district is pretty equal to the folks' vote in another district, and it's not weighted one district or the other. That every district is as close to equal as you can make it. And that was one of our guidelines that we used in drawing these maps, was to try to make the districts as close to zero deviation. Deviation is the difference in the actual size of the district and what your average size is, which in our case was 53,820 population. And this map reflects that we were able to do that. Our deviation was less than 1% over 53,820 and less than 1% under, which is as close as we could get to a zero as you can. And consider our other guidelines that we adopted, such as keeping counties together, keeping precincts together, complying with all the other laws that we had. That deviation is one that we achieved in this map. To give you an example, compared it to what was done 10 years ago when the Democrats had control. Our friends on this committee didn't have control, but your party. The deviations back then were as much as 5% over and under. And at that time it was thought that was a safe harbor. If you were within 5%, either over or under, that it didn't matter what your reason was, it was safe harbor. And the Larios case, which was a Georgia case, that challenged that concept because of the reasons for that deviation, held that that's not a safe harbor. You still have to have a reason for your deviation, whatever it is. So legal requirement, the one that we adopted, was to get as close to zero with the deviations as we could. Then the Georgia Constitution only has a couple of requirements for redistricting. One is that the territory in each district has to be contiguous, has to touch and join. You can't go around and pick up something if the geography does not connect. So it has to be contiguous. That's a Georgia constitutional requirement. And then the only other requirement is that we cannot have less than 180 House districts. We could have more, but you can't have less, and that's a Georgia constitutional requirement. We have this committee and this legislature has stuck to the 180 districts and has not tried to change that by increasing it in any way whatsoever. It might have made our job a little bit easier if we had more districts, and we get into that in a minute as to some of the real difficulties in putting this map together that you see in the statistics that I'll tell you about as a result of this redistricting. the so the two major problems, I think, in putting this map together, that anybody who's been trying to redraw our districts is complying with the Voting Rights Act and maintaining districts that are equal in population. And the reason that was a problem in putting this map together is that we had, and this is true probably in every state, you have shifting populations over a 10-year period. So you're losing populations in some parts of the state, like South Georgia, where I'm from Darien. South Georgia lost, didn't lose population, but didn't gain population as much as the rest of the state did. So that means that we had to increase the size of the districts in South Georgia in order to find 53,820 people. And when you do that, you're going to lose some districts because you run out of geography after a while, and there's no more people put in districts. And what our map reflects in South Georgia, that we lost 4 House districts in South Georgia as a result of the population not growing as fast as the rest of the state. In Southwest Georgia, we have lost two seats in Southwest Georgia, and 2 in the rest of South Georgia, for a total of 4. And what the result of that, when you lose a district, when you're looking at our incumbents, is that incumbents wind up in the same districts because you don't have districts for all the members that we have now. So in South Georgia, we have 4 pairings, as y'all probably have already heard from everybody by now. But we had 4 pairings of incumbents in South Georgia. One in the Augusta area has a pairing as a result of the population not growing as fast over there, and also as a result of the Voting Rights Act and trying to comply with the Voting Rights Act. Those two intertwine because if you look at the demographics in Georgia in the voting rights districts in the inner cities, 75% of those lost, or I shouldn't say lost, didn't gain as much population as the rest of the state of Georgia. So the voting rights districts, which grew from 42 in 2001 that we had at that time to 49 as of this time, based on the new population numbers. And a lot of that's a result of folks moving out of the inner city and creating more majority minority districts in the process that were greatly underpopulated, and some as much as 14 to 15,000 people underpopulated. So those were the two. And then in the Atlanta, DeKalb metro, inside the Beltway in Atlanta, we've got 5 pairings of incumbents based upon the loss of population and creating the majority minority districts. Then the other side of the coin is, when you're creating the majority minority districts, is that you can't legally, you're prohibited from packing those districts by putting everybody in districts that are highly minorities and not creating more districts. So you also can't go above a percentage of minorities in those districts that would amount to packing, and that varies based upon where the district is and what's around it. And there's not a definition. It's a legal term, and it's defined, I think, by and I'm not giving you legal advice. We have to ask the lawyers, but it's defined by the circumstances in each individual cases, whether or not there's packing involved. To give a little more data on our map, the existing state house map, the one that's in effect right now for the 2010 election cycle, had 68 districts which were above the ideal size for 2011 redistricting. Had 68 districts that were above 53,820 population. and 112 districts which were below the ideal size. And that necessitated the changes that have been made in the boundaries of the districts on the map. That change in the demographics, change in the population necessitated that. If you take those 68 districts that are overpopulated, 45 of those districts are currently held by Republicans, and 13 are currently held by Democrats. So the overwhelming majority of districts that were overpopulated were held by Republican members, and a minority of those are held by Democratic members. Of the 20 largest House districts existing right now before we start on this map, of those 20, 17 of those, of the largest ones, are Republican districts. And of the 20 smallest districts existing now before we redraw the maps, 17 of the 20 are Democrat districts. So there's an overwhelming increase in population in the Republican areas, and not as great an increase in the Democratic areas as Republican, based upon the existing maps and based upon the current census data. The ideal house size we talked about is 53,820. You come up with that by taking 180 seats into the total population of the state, which is 9,687,653. So you divide that by 180, which I can't do in my head, but someone wrote down for them that's 53,820 per district as the ideal house size. And I explained to you the House Proposal 1, the deviations. We've talked about those. The largest district in this plan that I'm asking you to pass out of here to the floor for a vote is 54,352. That's the largest population in the map that we're proposing. And the smallest is 53,287. And that makes a variance of less than 1 over and under. One of our guidelines in drafting our districts, that this committee, we adopted guidelines, as y'all recall. We had a meeting a month or two ago to adopt guidelines to apply to our statewide plan when we got it put together. And one of those guidelines or goals was to keep the counties together as much as possible, and to keep communities together as much as possible. In this plan, of the 159 counties, 87 of them are located in just one district. And I think I was given some information as to the small counties, the counties of 10,000 or so, that there's only one of those counties, I believe, in the plan that is divided at all. The counties that are divided are those that have higher population numbers that were necessary to share with the smaller counties to get up to the 53,820 number for each district. We have, in this plan, we have 31 counties that are split into 2 districts and 41 counties that are divided among 3 or more districts. One thing we put in our guidelines that we had unanimously adopted on this committee was to not have multi-member districts. Those type districts have been used in the past for discriminatory purposes, and we adopted that as a guideline to not have multi-member districts. Each district in Georgia has one representative. Let me talk just a minute about the majority-minority districts and where they're all located in the state. We have 31 of those districts that we've been able to maintain in the metro Atlanta area. We have 3 of those districts in the Columbus area. We have 2 in Macon. We have 4 in Augusta, 1 in East Georgia, and 4 in Southwest Georgia and Albany, and 1 in Valdosta, and 3 in Savannah, for a total of 49 districts. That's basically the process that we use to come up with this map. That's the highlights of what the map does, and I would ask you to, when we get through with our debate today, to adopt our HB 1EX as our plan to submit to the legislature for debate on the floor. With that, I'll be glad to open up to any questions anybody might have. I know there probably aren't any, but if you have any, I'll be glad to take them.
We've got a couple of flashing lights up here, but before I call on anybody, I just want to say on behalf of the members of this committee how much we appreciate the hours and days you have put into this process. You have left your home and your family and your law practice, and I don't think there's anybody in this state that's sitting further away from their home right now than you are, and you've been up here all summer, all spring, and I truly appreciate, the members of this committee truly appreciate it. You have fostered an environment of historic levels of outreach and inclusion and transparency, and certainly this is a process where not everybody's going to be happy, but I hope every single member of this legislature appreciates the effort that you've put into this process and the commitment that you've made to draw maps that are fair and transparent and constitutional, and on behalf of the committee, I thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with the first light I saw blinking, which is over here to my right. It's mic number 27. I believe it's the Majority Whip, Representative Ed Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few questions for you, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I think it would be helpful to the committee and to the general public if we sort of have you sort of talk a little bit more about the level of transparency that you've worked toward. How many public hearings did you have?
We had 12 public hearings
and
all over the state.
All over the state. And in addition to those public hearings, you also invited legislators to come in and talk about their particular area. Is that right?
We invited and encouraged and cajoled and drugged some of them in to participate and help in that process. And it's almost unanimous, not quite unanimous, but almost every member of the legislature has their fingerprint on this map from the input that they gave in the process.
How many outreach attempts did you have to the members of the to the members of the House in terms of contacting them and asking them to come in?
Well, our general process was to start even back in the session, perhaps, with some notification that we were going to have that process where we'd have members coming in. As we went through the process and members started coming in, we had my office contacted every member just about to ask them to come in, gave them a date to come in, to look at maps and to give us input into that. So I would guess 3 or 4 times probably, but yeah. I don't know exact number. I don't have that right at hand.
Okay.
I know the Reapportionment Office also put out some emails and things to members, making their office available to everybody and asking for their input, because it's pretty hard to draw these districts if you don't have folks from those areas come in and communicate with you as to what the communities of interest are in that area, and what counties ought to be together and not together, and those kind of things that we don't know about unless members from those areas come in and participate with us. So in order to get to that, to make it as fair as it could possibly be.
Now, when you say near unanimous, we're talking about both Republicans and Democrats,
Republicans
right?
and Democrats, yes.
And when, since some of the criticism has been lodged by my friends in the opposing party, let me ask you this: when members of the opposing party, the Democrats, would come in, did you try to move district lines around based on their recommendations?
If there's any way possible, without upsetting the voting rights districts or any of that, we swapped precincts around. We moved precincts to bring in areas of those districts that were more compatible with one district or the other that we didn't know about, and probably in almost a huge percentage of the cases that came in and asked for those things, we were able to do something to accommodate some of those desires. We can't make perfect districts, and you know that as well as anybody on this committee, because your district got chopped up pretty good, and but we tried to. We did make numerous changes and improved a lot of districts all over the state based upon the input we received.
Yeah. Now, in addition to the House members in general, you also met with the leadership of both parties, correct?
Well, we met with the leadership. We extended an invitation out to the minority leader to meet with us. This started back in probably right after the public hearings ended. We asked the minority leader to sit down with us and let's compare notes on, particularly on the majority minority districts, which are the really hard ones for us to draw, and compare what she had prepared on her side of the aisle, and is there something in that would help make these districts even better. Unfortunately, she refused to come in. We met with her on one occasion, and a couple of weeks after July the 5th, and asked her, and we're assured that we would have access to compare, showed her what we had, what our map was. I told her what the map was. Probably we didn't have it all statewide put together yet, but we told her kind of where it was going, where the pairings were, and where the problems were that we saw, and sincerely and really sought input on that, because it's really tough. It don't matter whose district you're eliminating. When you're having to pair somebody up, it hurts. We're all one big family, and it was. So we did, once we got the statewide plan together and had the map ready. Run out of tape. It's all right. You keep unplugging it on her, Lynn.
Somebody didn't pay the electric bill. Okay.
Yes, sir. We got it.
All right. We were if we're ready, we were discussing your entreaties to various members and to the leadership in the Democratic Party, and you were discussing your offer to have them come in and present to you alternative maps for your consideration to see what could be done.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you ever told whether or not they would in fact bring maps to you, alternative maps?
Yes, we were told that we would have access to those to see what they had that was maybe different than what we had that might work within our plan.
Yeah.
That was in the Speaker's office, and we discussed it openly. And then once we had the statewide map put together, we invited them in, the Democratic leadership in, to look at that statewide plan in advance of us putting it on the internet and putting it out to the public. And they came. One of the minority officers came, and we went through each district. The reapportionment office with me there went through every district that they wanted to ask about, got every piece of data we had that was involved with that district, and openly and sincerely asked them to look at all that and see what they thought.
Well, despite their statements that they would offer you alternative maps, we're now at, according to my watch, 2:50 on August 16th, 50 minutes into this hearing. Have you seen any map offered by the Democratic Party regarding the House?
No, I have not. I did receive a letter around lunchtime from the minority leader stating that there was a map and that there's a plan that they have that they want to present to our committee. Okay. And that's the first time today.
Okay.
And that's the first time. That's
but
the first
despite
time.
promises that they would provide one to you with detailed alternatives prior to your submission of the map, they never did that, correct?
They did not.
Okay. Now, in regards to the various things that you had to deal with regarding constitutional, I think you've covered the fact that you're governed by the constitutional requirement of one person, one vote, correct?
That's correct.
And that was something that was loudly enunciated in a decision that throughout the maps that were passed by the General Assembly in 2001, correct?
That's correct.
And that was the Larios decision that you referred to.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. In regards to the Voting Rights Act, you sort of walk through a requirement that I found interesting, in which the Justice Department, when they look for whether or not there's regression or not, they take a benchmark. As a benchmark, any other maps that have been previously approved by the Justice Department and by the courts, correct?
With the latest approved maps.
The latest approved maps, and those would be for the House, those would be the maps approved by the courts in 2004, correct?
That's right.
Now, I also understood you to say that you don't look at the census data in 2001 or 2004, you look at the census data in 2010. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that a requirement of the Justice Department?
That's a requirement. That's in their guidelines that they put out, that requires that you look at the current census data based upon the existing.
As a matter of fact,
you have.
those are the requirements required under the as published in the Federal Register. Department of Justice filed February 9th, 2011.
That's correct.
And that specifically requires you to take the benchmark plan, the last plan that's been approved by the courts, take a look at the 2010 data, census data, and apply it to that map, and then try to determine the number of majority-minority districts, correct?
Yes, what those guidelines are, once we get our map together, then it has to be submitted to, once it's approved by the legislature and signed by the governor, it has to be submitted to the Department of Justice for pre-clearance. And those guidelines set forth what they look at in order to pre-clear the plan to make sure that there is no retrogression in the plan. And
underneath the underneath the existing benchmark plan, we had, I believe, 49. As of 2010, we had 49 majority-minority districts, correct?
That's correct.
And underneath your particular plan, we have how many majority-minority districts?
49.
Yeah. Now, in regards to pairings, you alluded to, but I think perhaps a little bit more data for the committee and for the general public might be helpful based on some information that your office has given me. You talked about in general terms of the districts that had generally lost population versus districts that had gained population. In other words, districts that were over 54,000 people and districts that were under 54,000.
That's correct.
And the overwhelming number of districts that were well over 54,000 were Republican districts, correct?
That's correct.
And the ones that were overwhelmingly that were generally below the number were overwhelmingly Democratic districts, correct?
That's correct.
And in particular, I found interesting, because I am a resident inside the perimeter of Metro Atlanta, of the 10 smallest districts by population. If I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, 8 of them were located inside the perimeter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. With the smallest district having as few people as 37,000 people, correct?
That's correct.
Now, under one person, one vote. I'm sorry about that. I go back to law school. That used to be referred to differently. But under one person, one vote, we're required to have all these districts approximately 54,000 people, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So all those districts that are well under populated have to be increased in size by population, right?
That's correct.
And of those 8 districts inside the perimeter that were underpopulated, how many of those were Democratic? Held by Democrats.
Districts inside?
Yeah. Well, my understanding that all 8 of those 10 districts I just alluded to were Democratic districts.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. The other area that lost population in this state was from South Georgia, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And lost population in relation to the overall increase in the state, correct?
Right. They didn't increase as fast as the rest of the state.
All right. Now, the pairings that took place, if I have reviewed, I see the document that your office supplied to us, it would appear to me that all of the districts that required, because of increased size, geographic size of the districts, that required pairings between existing House members, were either districts located inside the perimeter of Metro Atlanta or South Georgia, correct?
Well,
South and Middle Georgia.
South and Middle. I don't know that the one over near Augusta would consider themselves south, but yeah, south and Middle Georgia.
But that's another area that had lost population.
That's right.
Yeah, and so you had to, as a result of that, have to pair certain people.
Absolutely. The population is not there.
Okay. And the pairings where there was loss in population in Republican areas resulted in pairings of Republicans, correct?
Yes, there are four pairings of Republicans in this map.
And the areas that had lost population, in particular inside the perimeter in my area of Metro Atlanta, resulted in a number of pairings, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And just to be clear, in your understanding, I know you're not a lawyer. You are a lawyer, but I know you're not here testifying as a lawyer. You got the other ones here. He's made a point of telling me that he's not going to provide legal advice. That's what he hired other folks for.
I've been here a long time, but I'm still a lawyer. Ed.
Yeah.
Representative.
You and me both. I've got to call my office every once in a while to make sure. In my review of the Voting Rights Act, while we certainly are required under the Voting Rights Act, and we should protect those who are supposed to be protected in the Voting Rights Act, a legislator is not a protected class, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
We quit again?
We've got a power strip and extension cord coming in right now.
I would say this.
Each outlet is being furloughed. One after the next. I'm afraid this outlet's 20 minutes off. Yeah, that's really good. Roger, when did you stop beating your wife?
You ready? Okay. Next is Mike, number 18. I think it's Representative Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all of your hard work. I know we spent a lot of time on the road. I got to know a lot of my committee members this summer traveling around for the public hearings, and I want to thank the committee staff as well. They've done a lot of work and spent countless hours on this. My question begins with pairings and sort of a follow-up to Representative Lindsay's questions. And we certainly understand that as populations shift and move and you may lose people in one area, that you've got to account for that and make adjustments. The question, though, is were any efforts made to avoid unnecessary pairings? In the instance of DeKalb County, for example, we've got 2 open seats, so we've been able to add additional seats while at the same time we've got members who have been paired. My question would also concern the radius used. So was there another approach that may have been able to avoid these pairings? So say, for instance, you looked at a radius and you had a geographic area and you had to account for so many seats and so many people. Could that area have been moved over, maybe east? We've got a lot of growth in the Gwinnett and Rockdale and Henry County areas, and I'm wondering if you may have been able to take a different approach to avoid some of the pairings, and were any efforts made in that regard?
Well, the problem with trying to move those pairings over is the racial makeup of those districts to stay where you're not packing, where you get 85 and 90% black population in those districts. So my answer would be that we could not avoid those pairings. Absolutely could not avoid them. Believe me, we worked hard to not have pairings. And if you want to compare pairings we have in this map to what was done 10 years ago. 10 years ago, there were 47 pairings in the map that was put together by this legislature 10 years ago. And of those 47, 37 of those pairings were Republicans. 9 were Democrats and 1 was an independent. and I just point that out to say that when your population is shifting, you cannot avoid pairings because you don't have the population in those areas. So, and what we mean by pairings, for those who haven't really explained what a pairing is, that's where two incumbents wind up, when you redraw the map, winds up with two incumbents living in the same new district. That becomes a pairing. And no, we could not avoid those pairings, and comply with the Voting Rights Act and comply with the one person, one vote rule. Could not be done.
Were any alternatives considered? We have one version of the map, but are there any other alternatives that perhaps could have given us a different outcome?
We ran a lot of scenarios all over the state in different districts and different sections of the state, and this final product is the most fair and best map that we could come up with, and that's why we sought input from your party. If you had other things for us to look at, we certainly wanted to look at that and see if there was something that we hadn't seen in all those different scenarios that we ran. That would help with that, and it would have been beneficial to have that. I think. I don't know what you have in your plan that I suppose we're going to see today, but we would like to have seen that in the process and see if there is something else. We put months. We actually put months into looking at those issues with the voting rights districts and complying with the law, because that's the most litigious part of because that's a legal requirement. So if you don't meet that, that's the most litigious part of putting together one of these plans. So, aside
from race, were there any other factors used in creating the majority-minority districts?
Well, we considered Voting Rights Act. We considered one person, one vote. We had your members, had you come in, matter of fact, and look at your district and propose communities of interest and precincts that maybe we had missed that were more compatible with something in your district. So we considered all of our guidelines in all of these districts. But, certainly a predominating part of that analysis is the Voting Rights Act and making sure that we comply with that.
Can you explain the process we used? I heard a little bit about the census and the overlay, but how do we arrive to the 49? How do we get to that number as being appropriate, the 49 majority-minority?
Well, we take the existing districts as they were last drawn, which was drawn by the court, and then you take the 2010 census data, population numbers, and apply that to those existing districts, and then look at which ones are majority minority and which ones aren't.
Okay, and one last question. In districts that were not majority minority, what criteria were used to determine communities of interest, and how did you arrive at what would be an appropriate boundary based on, and what factors were used in determining what would be the best communities to be kept together, and how did you arrive at that?
Well, we based it on a lot of factors. A big part of that was from the public hearings we had all over in all the metropolitan areas around the state, and the information we received from those the public. We had, as you recall, we had pretty great participation in that process, one that we should be proud of. And I think the folks in those areas were really pleased that we brought government to them. And then the reaching out to every representative in all those areas and getting their input as to what is important in this part of the state, as to meeting those communities and bringing those together as much as you can in relation to and in conjunction with complying with your legal requirements. So we just a varied information that we looked at to do that. And you were a good part of that. We appreciate it.
Representative Howard.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you too, Mr. Chairman, for your hard work, and I've enjoyed working on this on the committee here, and I'd like to center my questions around communities of interest. And how did we? And I look at this map, you know, since we've received it, looking at the overall map, looking at some of the districts like 55 and 84, 87, 80, just using those, and maybe like 63, those particular districts. Those districts seem to be just precinct oriented. I don't like little lines, and I'm not sure. Was there communities of interest used to compile those districts? Because it looks like just a little slither, a little line. I don't know what you call it. How did we? Well, not we, because I didn't participate in that process. How did we come to this?
Well, we did the same way we did your district in Augusta, where we take the information and we have you come in and sit down with us, and we have these members come in and sit down with us and give us the information as to, in these particular districts, I haven't looked to see who's in them, so yeah. Perhaps someone didn't come in from this district, but almost every member came in and participated at some time or other in this process. So it's done the same way that your district was. That we got that information, and then as much as we could incorporate that into it in addition to what we'd already done, we made changes. We changed precincts. We changed numerous precincts in numerous of the districts like that in order to bring those communities in where we might have missed something or made it a better district. Now, when you're looking at the majority-minority districts, one of the problems you have in the metropolitan Atlanta area is that the minorities are concentrated in the southern parts of the metropolitan Atlanta area. And when you start drawing those districts, in order not to put all minorities into one district, you have to draw them where you bring in some non-minority members in order to get your population number up. All those districts are underpopulated, and we have to increase those districts in population, and not pack those districts. You know, we could have drawn 7 districts that were 90% minority versus 10 that were 55, 60, or 65% minority. So, in order to do that, you have to go north-south just about and bring in some non-minority population to get to the 53,820.
So we had to use the race as the defining factor to.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think we've used race as a defining factor. Certainly, the Voting Rights Act is a big factor.
Okay.
Those precincts that are put in there are big factors. Who's in those precincts and what communities of interest are in there.
Right.
So no, I don't think it's anywhere fair to say that only race was considered in that, because it wasn't.
Did we allow the committee members to have any input into this conversation at the overall point as a committee, or was it just the reapportionment staff and leadership?
In what?
In coming to the final map, the map that we have here, the proposed map. I know on the committee, I only came in and talked about my particular district, but not about the overall map. So at what point does the committee, did the committee have any input on this?
Well, as you indicated, you had input in the area where you're from and in your district. And once we got all that around the state and brought all the groups in, like you came in with a group and looked at the 5 or 6 districts up in the Augusta area.
Right.
And we did that all over the state. Had them come in, call, bring them in, and show them that, get their input. Then we put together the statewide map, incorporate all that into the statewide map as we could, and released it last Friday. And we brought the plan itself to the Minority Caucus office for digestion by anybody that wanted to look at it on that side, besides posting it on the internet and making it available to everybody there. So it is my proposal as any other piece of legislation. The legislator drafts it and gets it ready, and then throws it out there for everybody to look at and say, "What do you think about it?" So it's my, it's not the committee wasn't a committee that drew this, that did this map, but there's a participation of every member of this committee in the map. But it's a piece of legislation that I'm proposing based upon everything that we've talked about having happened over the last 5 or 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. And follow one final. In inviting the members of the House in, did we invite the different parties in together, or did we bring the parties in separate? And I use my particular area as an example. We never did come in as a delegation. We came in, the Democrats came in, and I guess our Republican.
Yours had to be the exception. Then I don't know why your Republican member of your delegation wasn't here when you came in.
Okay.
No, we had both Democrats and Republicans from all over the state and all those areas come in together and discuss from Columbus, Macon, Albany, Southwest Georgia, Atlanta, to DeKalb County, Savannah, all over the state. And if there wasn't a Republican come in when you did, I wasn't even aware of that. But certainly everybody was invited to come in together, and there's a purpose in that, because our goal in this whole process was to make those maps because Georgians demand it. Right. I think Georgians expect us to make the maps as good as we can make them, and with both parties being there, Democrats and Republicans looking at those areas, and we were able to make some important changes in those maps, I think, as a result of bringing in a whole delegation as opposed to just 1 or 2 members.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative McKillop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your hard work. I just wanted to follow up on what Representative Howard asked with one quick question. Isn't it the case that actually right now this meeting here today is an additional opportunity for this committee as a group to review the map as a whole? That is in addition to the individual opportunities and opportunities as regional groups, but that this is the legislative process here today, and that this is our committee's chance to review these maps, make amendments to them, offer any joint suggestions, and then do whatever the will of the committee is. Isn't that the case?
That's the purpose of us being here, is to not only that, but also to hear from the folks who've signed up about what input they have. So yes, you're correct.
Mike, number 13. I think that's Representative Beasley Teagues on the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity that I had to work with you as we traveled around the state. I want to apologize that I was not able to be called into your office or do whatever the Fulton County delegation did to submit information, since I'm one of the few people that have been here drawing lines for a while. But I would like to say that, because my mother was ill, that was the reason, but thank you for the phone call. I just want to make mention of that, and then I just want to say thank you to the committee as well, because many of you called, and I do appreciate that. And that's all I want to say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
This is Mike 16. I think it's Representative Hudson.
I, too, would like to thank the chairman for his hard work, the committee's hard work, and certainly the staff. But I would like to go on record to make one statement, and you know what I'm going to say. I was not invited to a meeting, and I wanted to go on record in saying that. I don't know if that was a mistake, since I was also a member of this committee, but I was not invited to the Augusta area meeting. I stayed late one day when I found out there had been one, and you were kind enough to talk to me. But as a final note in that on that little subject, I don't have a fingerprint on this map at all. And I showed you some alternatives, but was told on 2 occasions that it was couldn't be done. I do have an interest, Mr. Chairman, in the splitting of precincts. Just to preface that question, I do belong to a district now that does have split precincts in Putnam County, and it's been atrocious for those people in Putnam County. How many split precincts do we have in this current map?
I don't know the number. I know that was one of our guidelines, was to be very careful about
Not
splitting precincts and not. Well, it's impossible to comply with one person, one vote. In some circumstances, not split some precincts, and there are some split precincts in this
There
map.
are some.
There are some, but that's one of our guidelines we followed as we went through, was to split as few as possible. And even after we got through with the input from the areas and we started putting the maps together, someone in the reapportionment office was constantly going back and looking at all the different things that have been proposed and drawn, and see if there were precincts could be put back together. And there were lots of times precincts were put back together even after we had the initial drawing, to make them balance out. You have to, if you put this one together in this district, then you got to take it from someplace else. So, but they did work on that even after we got through. So there's a.
Is there any staff present that could give us that information?
I don't know if they have that particular number on number of split precincts.
While we don't have the exact split precinct number as of right this moment, I can tell you that we minimize number of split precincts anywhere possible, and if we had to split, we made sure that we split on a very identifiable feature, such as a major road, highway, or some type of landmark that was present. We took every split precinct into consideration. We took the local election.
Okay, they can't hear you. And this is Jimmy McDonald, who's the director of the reapportionment office.
So while I don't have the exact number of split precincts available at hand here, I could get that if needed to anybody from our office. I can add to what the chairman said, that any precinct that was split, the local elections office was really taking into consideration as far as we've made the split on a major road, a highway, or some type of identifiable landmark, so every office would be able to identify where the split was as easily as possible.
As a former local elected official, and I have quite a bit of background there, this is very expensive for them to do when you have that. So I would appreciate that being minimized. Thank you.
I've heard from my local officials the same thing. I think everybody around the state has that same concern, and we certainly paid attention to it as much as we could.
Thank you.
Representative Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman. Again, I would like to recognize the fact of all the hard work that Chairman Lane put in during the past few months, and on my visit here, and after I left, I made a couple of calls back, so I appreciate the support and answers that I received from you. However, I have two questions I'd like to ask. One of them came to me today from a television station in Savannah, and the question is, what's the story behind the district that stretches from Bloomingdale to Hinesville? Now, I believe that's either Ron Stevens or Al Williams area. Could you give me an answer that I could take back?
Well, I'd guess you're talking about Ron Stevens' district, because
Okay.
Representative Williams is entirely within Liberty County. His district was not changed. He was one of the few who in the legislature who got pretty much what he asked for. so. There's an oversight on our part now. That'd be Ron Stevens' district. I think his district extended down into that area before, so I don't think that was a tremendous change in what his district did before. His district's changed, but that part of it, I think he came down the coast some in his district. So,
And I could say that some of the area that he had looks like it's assigned to me now, so he had to go further down the road.
well, you were underpopulated in
Right.
the district, if you
Right.
recall.
So I picked up some of his.
So we had to put population in there in your district. So
Right.
He sacrificed some of his constituents just for you.
Okay, let me get to the second question.
Okay, I thought you were through.
The second question pertains to the city of Athens, Clark County. During the hearing, the citizens indicated that they wanted to preserve the community interests of the city of Athens. Could you tell me what was done to honor their request?
Well, we have, you have three I think it's three representatives coming into Clark County now, Do you know?
Right, 3.
Okay, and one of those is entirely within Clark County,
Right.
Which is Representative Hurd's district, which is a Democratic district,
Right.
and then the other 2 are Republican districts coming in there. Those other districts had to take population from other counties that were overpopulated. They were in a situation where there was overpopulation in Barrow and Jackson County, and so that population was used to create some more districts, and some of it coming into Clark County. So, I think everything was done to comply with that as much as you could with the demographics we had, and to comply with the one person, one vote, and all the other legal considerations.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your participation.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Lane, I want to thank you for a job well done. Well, we traveled over the state a lot this summer. I really enjoyed it. Got 2 questions, though. I was one of those affected by the pairings, and I guess my question might be kind of selfish, but I want to ask, how did you determine which incumbents needed to be paired?
Well, there is no magic formula, but in your district it was a as we looked around the state to put together the 49 majority minority districts and to maintain those to meet our benchmark, your district, which was underpopulated but was a majority minority, as I recall, and Representative Hudson, who was also underpopulated. When we maintained that district and met and tried to comply with the Voting Rights Act, it threw 2 incumbents into that same district. So it was a result of compliance with the law. And all these pairings, it's a result of compliance with law, either with something like that or with meeting the one person, one vote. If you lose population, you have to add people to those districts, and when you do that, it's inevitable that some incumbents are going to wind up in the same district. So it's no magic formula how you do that. It's just part of drawing the maps.
One more question then, and I wanted to be here a long time in the Georgia legislature. So why did you pair me against somebody as strong as Representative Hudson?
Well, she had the same question when she looked at that map. She wasn't any happier than you were, and it hurts us. We all became friends. We all became friends in this process, and I think a lot of all of y'all. I mean, and I consider you friends, and it really it's going to happen. There were 47 pairings 10 years ago, and I'm sure that the 9 Democrat pairings hurt the Democrats some. I don't know if they cared about our 37 Republican pairings or not. I assume they did because it does hurt. We become friends in this process, and it really does hurt, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. Thank you.
Representative Stevens.
I truly have one question, Mr. Chairman. Again, I can't thank you enough for your efforts and on behalf of the committee and in our travels this summer. My wife thought I moved to Valdosta, Albany, Columbus, Atlanta, but no, we're still here. And as someone who was paired back in 2004 when the coaches drew the maps and was sent home, I can understand, I can empathize with those people who have been paired in this process. I only have one question. This question was, I came up with this question in reading a couple of articles in the Savannah Morning News. In keeping with community of interest, I was trying to figure out what was the rationale for bringing District 161 down to Chatham County when in the 10,000 census, I think she had about over 80,000 people in that district. And I wondered what's the necessity for stretching it down to Chatham County, and what was rationale for that?
When you're drawing more than one district at a time, believe it or not. There's 180 districts, and there are other representatives in Effingham County, the adjoining county. So when you fill those districts, her district had to have that population to create her district also. You're talking about, I guess, Representative Purcell's district. Is that 161? So, that's part of the population that we needed to make her district meet the one person, one vote rule, and create the other districts all around. It's not one in isolation. Her wish would be to have it all in Effingham County. I don't know that, but I would guess folks would rather be in one county than to be in two, because you have two county governments you got to answer to and all that. But I don't know that, but it is based on drawing all the districts around there and meeting the population demands in those districts.
Okay, the reason I asked that question because Savannah Morning News did 2 articles on it. One was in the editorial, and the other was in an article. And it was that the reason that she was drawn down there because it would have ended up with short one Republican as opposed to Democrats. And she was thrown down there to balance it off. Now, I take that as an insult from the morning news, especially for myself and other Democrats in our delegation, because we have a good delegation. And I take it as an insult and a slap in the face at those Democrats in our delegation. I'm hoping that I can take you for your word on that, but it leaves some food for thought on that, and I think that that's something that needs to be looked at. Okay. Again, I want to thank you. I really enjoyed myself this summer. I really did.
Well,
yeah.
Some in the audience kind of don't take me at my word when I say we have become we were friends before this started, but really got close during this process, and it was a very good process, and I'm proud. Everybody participated. Everybody showed up. Everybody went to everything, and it was good.
Well, you and I had a little history before the committee, so
that's right. Yeah. That's right.
All right, thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
We have some follow-ups now. Is there anybody else have any questions? Before I go to people for the second time, I want to make sure everybody that wants to ask questions the first time haven't been given an opportunity to do so. I don't see any. Okay, we're going to go back to Representative Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask about some of the districts that were previously very compact and seemed to represent communities and communities that had a lot of commonalities. And it appears, especially in Fulton and DeKalb counties, that we've got a lot of oddly shaped districts that are very narrow and long, and they seem to split communities. And I'm just wondering what guidelines were used and how we arrived at these sort of districts.
Let me ask you a question. Which districts are you talking about in Fulton and DeKalb that were compact that are now elongated?
Well, one I'm thinking about is 63. I believe that's Fulton, and then there are a couple. I don't have numbers in front of me. '55 and 84, 83.
And are those majority minority districts?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Under your definition?
Majority.
Under my definition.
Oh, under your definition, yes.
All those districts in the metropolitan Atlanta area and DeKalb County did not gain population like the rest of the state. The smallest districts, existing districts, 7 or 8 of those are in the metropolitan Atlanta area. So in order to comply with one person, one vote, you got to go find more people. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you got to comply with the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
So it's not as simple as just drawing a compact district. We drew some districts in there that wound up being 95% minority, and just as a scenario, trying to do some of those things. And you just can't draw them compact and avoid the packing question.
What is our definition? What are we using as a guide for packing? Does it vary from district to district, or do we have a standard we use?
Well, the court cases don't tell us where that magic line is. It does vary from case to case.
Representative Howard.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to piggyback off what Representative Mayo was on. I think what jumped out at me when the reason I brought those districts up when I first asked was in the guiding principles that we voted on back in early July or late June, whenever it was. One of the things that we talked about that's in there is protecting boundaries for county lines and precincts, and as well as the communities of interest. And when I look at a district like 63, as what Representative Mayo was talking about, and it jumps 3 counties, that just I don't know that area at all, but I was just using that as an example. And if you go up, and I don't know if it's a majority minority district or not. If you go up to number 80, the same thing happens, where you've got that particular district that goes up, and then all of a sudden it jumps over into another county. And I'm not sure whether there's a community of interest reason for tying it together, or the basis for making that happen. And that was what I was trying to get some understanding on in my question there.
Well, in drawing these districts, we considered all those guidelines.
Yeah.
And also the legal requirements. And all these districts I think you're talking about are voting rights districts. So in addition to the communities of interest and keeping counties together, we also had to maintain our benchmark of 49 majority minority districts. So all those factors went together in bringing those districts to where they are.
Okay. All right. Follow up, not related to the same subject. One of the things I find myself getting a little edgy about with my community when I go back home is that one of the things that I heard all across the state when we were doing the hearings is that I think at practically every hearing the question was asked, will the public have a chance to see these maps and ask questions prior to us voting on them? And I think most of the committee could attest to that we heard that question continuously throughout the hearings. And I was planning a meeting for my community, but I never could get a meeting set because we didn't know when we were going to get the maps. And now we're in session, so it feels like a freight train going down a hill, and I don't know whether it's going to run over us whether we want it to or not. But I'm planning a meeting this Saturday in Augusta to let the community have a chance to give us some input, because we have not, on Friday afternoon when we received the maps, we've not had an opportunity to hear from the public. So is it true that we may be voting on this before Friday?
Depends on what this committee does.
Okay.
But were you here 10 years ago?
No, and I hope that no one holds that against me.
I wasn't here 10 years ago either.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from what we heard in our meetings we had around the state. The other thing that we uniformly heard everywhere we went is, do not do this like it was done 10 years ago. And we didn't. If you talk to anybody, and anybody that was here 10 years ago, this was the most open, transparent process that's ever been in Georgia. It's not, it is a legislative process, so it has to be a bill drafted. It has to be brought to the committee just like any other bill. Yeah. But we've received input from citizens all over the state in this process about different members would come in and see a scenario that they didn't like, and have members from their community email us, and you might have got some of those emails, I would suspect, being on the committee. So it was a very open and transparent process, and a very fair process that we went through to get to this point.
I think in some ways it has, but I think in one way we're missing. What we're missing here is having the opportunity to go back to our communities and let them give us some feedback. I feel like I have not given my community that opportunity, and I wish that I had that opportunity and hope that we would give our communities that opportunity to give us feedback, because we're here, sometimes closed off by these brick walls and things, and sometimes just going out there, getting on the playground, going to church, and hearing what people have to say after they see something helps give us the feedback that we need to come back and make sure we do the best job. And that's what I'm hoping that we have an opportunity to do.
Well, we have, for the first time ever, we've put the maps out there before we came into session so that the public would have that opportunity to look at the maps. And they have looked at them, believe me. I've heard from some of them. And that's never been done in the past. And it's technology is part of it, but part of it is because we've made this as open and transparent as you can make in the legislative process. And so I appreciate your concern, but I don't think that in practicalities would work under these circumstances. But that's an ideal that I think we all would aspire to have the public have as much input as possible in these processes. But they elect us to pass these laws and make these decisions. And I know I hear from my folks when I'm back home. They have me come speak to them, and they hammer me about redistricting. And I'm sure you've had that in Augusta. So there's a lot of input from the public, and then I think they look to us to make those legislative decisions as to whether this is a fair map and a fair piece of legislation. But I appreciate your concern.
Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make an observation, if it's appropriate, about Representative Howard's comments about freight trains and a little perspective from where I was here 10 years ago. I've been hit by that freight train, and I was here for now my 5th reapportionment. And I just wanted to offer some of that perspective. Mr. Chairman, isn't it true that at that time, as a comparative, on 911, when this country was under attack, those who were drawing the maps at that time, the public hadn't seen a map. They were still in the back room drawing those maps. Is one of my recollections. Is that not true?
That's my understanding.
I remember that. And when these maps were drawn in 1981, there were individuals drawing with pencils in the back room. Isn't it true that there's really 3 things in common when the other side was drawing these maps? It was run by the Democrats in the back room. They were highly partisan maps, and they were all thrown out. Just a little perspective.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Thank you.
Representative Beasley Teague.
I just want to say that, we didn't talk about what I needed in my district, my communities of interest and whatnot. And I just looked at the maps yesterday and a little bit more today. So from just looking at it, since I was around in the 90s, when Cynthia McKinney drew her Max Black plan, to me, and looking at your map, at the colors, we have a river going down Fulton County, District 55. You talk about community of interest. If it's in West End, what is it doing almost up in Buckhead? Community of interest. Dr. Lowry has no interest in going to Buckhead. That's who's down on the West End piece. Then they go past Martin Luther King and I-20, where the apartments and whatnot are. So when you talk about homeowners off Cascade, their homes they're not able to do evaluation of their homes because so many of them were bought so long ago or built so long ago by the present owner. I don't think we have anything against people who built their homes and still in them. But it looks like their community of interest has been torn apart by going the way that the lines have been drawn. Community of interest to me would be someplace where you shop, near where you live, where you go to school. So 55 don't look like the community of interest that the people in the southern part of 55 should have. Then I look at 63, the same problem. it's not showing me the community of interest that we really need to have. You have a district that going up DeKalb County. You've lost that particular community of interest. Then I am a female in this body of men up here, and women, but mostly men. And when this map you have touched, every comparing you have done has been with a female, Republican or Democrat, mostly Democrat. You have paired with somebody else, a female. And I've been here long enough to know throughout the history of this state since back in the 70s, you have destroyed women in the legislature by pairing them or putting them out saying they don't have population, but yet you made 12 new districts. And Mr. Chairman, I know you didn't do this. I know it's the people that work for you. And I want them to know. This is ludicrous. How are you going to take all the women out? You know what, you can put me where you can, but the real deal is you don't take all the women out of the legislature. We're no way near being what we need to be.
All right, let me respond to that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to let you finish, ma'am, but I am going to admonish the crowd. We cannot have audible responses from the crowds. This is a process meant to give the members of this committee an opportunity to ask the questions of the author of this bill, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to treat this process with the respect and the dignity it deserves. So to the extent that we have more response from the crowd, audible response that's going to affect that process, we're going to have to ask security to come in here and ask people to leave that can't allow the process to be conducted in the manner that it needs to be conducted in. So, Representative Teague, Beasley Teague, the mic is yours.
Thank you, sir. But I don't appreciate that piece when you talk getting rid of women, when you're putting them with other people, white, black, blue, or green, Republican or Democrat, if we're going to do what the law states. Now, we're saying we're dealing with the Voting Rights Act, and we're taking minority districts north to give them more people. Well, my district had 21,000 people over, and I wound up going into another county, 65. I mean, Douglas County and Fulton County, we have the Chattahoochee to divide us, to let us know we have no community of interest. Now, I could be wrong, but that's what I see. Really, the last time I saw something that looked like this, some of this, these two was during the Max Black Plain, when Cynthia McKinney took the fingers and the knives and the forks and went around this place and created those districts. And I'm talking about the legislative districts, because that's how I got here. They created other districts to create where black people could get elected. Okay, that couldn't have been the forefront of this. Because you tore up 49 districts. I mean, that could have been most anywhere. But yet you have created 12 new districts. Really, you could have kept that where people who were in those areas, not necessarily the legislators that we're serving now, but at least they would have had, to me, a better opportunity to serve their people by not going from North Fulton to South Fulton, which South Fulton is totally happy, I'm sure, because I'm sure they were at the table with you to do this, and I wasn't able to come. But, even with not being there, I would have thought it would have been a little bit different from this, considering, now I guess none of them know the communities of interest, but I do know this. Buckhead and Bankhead have no community of interest. And that's what I see that has been done in these maps. That's not good. And when you just take color and nothing else, bypass female, male, and just create what?
Is that a question?
So the question would be, sir, at this particular time, would you truly consider community of interest and look at these lines? Would you also consider the women that are coming into this legislature even in the future. Because what I understand, y'all can't beat us every time.
Well,
All right, y'all. So dealing with what you said you were going to do, work with the community of interest, and do what they did, the things that the master did in his plan. I don't think the master got rid of all the women. I'm still here, and I don't think he did. So we didn't really interpret what he did, I don't think, to the fullest extent of the law.
And that kind of shows you the fallacy in that argument, because the voters decide who comes here, not us. They will decide whether they want to elect a female representative or a male representative or whatever. We create the districts, and then the voters in that district, they'll decide who comes here. So
pair them with our male counterparts,
and
like you've done in this plan.
It's impossible not to have pairings when you've lost population, and you don't have the population in South Georgia to create all those districts. They've got to be created somewhere else where the population has moved.
Okay, but so
the same way Fulton and DeKalb County, folks have moved out of those.
Representative, we have to give an opportunity to answer the question. Thank you.
Folks have moved out of southern Fulton and southern DeKalb, except for your district. Your district must have liked you because it increased in population a lot.
I know, and then you took me to another county.
But overall, there's a loss of about 3 seats in DeKalb and Fulton County in those minority districts, and in order to create those districts, you're going to have to get the population somewhere, and you shared some of yours with them to help make those districts. So you're so kind. It's glad to have you back. You're still a great representative. We appreciate you being back with us. Sorry you couldn't be in the process.
Representative Hudson.
Yeah. All right.
There you go.
I was here, to clarify, I was here 10 years ago, and I was here to watch in 91. So I understand what the representative is talking about. I do remember the Black Max plan, and actually this does remind me of the Black Max plan. But just one more time on my part of the world, if that's all right. And it's probably going to be a comment instead of a question. But all the people in the room, I'm sure, know about the Black Belt in Georgia. It was the very fertile area of Georgia. It pretty much follows the fall line. And 10 years ago, after we were sued, there were several of us that spent quite a bit of time with Justice Department lawyers. And one of those afternoons that I was with them, I was told that my county, that I loved, where I live, is statistically the blackest county in Georgia. And I was told by Justice that they always start with Hancock County and let it ripple out. I don't see that happen this time. As a matter of fact, if you look down through the Black Belt, the fertile area of Georgia, there's very little attention to any Democrat. There's lots of Republicans in the Black Belt, and I just wondered why there weren't more, what more attention paid to accommodating the Black Belt of Georgia.
Well, I wouldn't agree with you that there wasn't. We created that district that you're in as a result of the Voting Rights Act was a big factor in that district because it is. But it's lost population. Both districts that were combined there had lost population, and you see how big the district is geography-wise in order to get 53,820 people in it. And the other districts are smaller, where the Republican districts were created, or more populated areas, which are in your language maybe are Republican. I wouldn't agree with your premise that we didn't pay attention to the we paid a lot of attention to the voting rights aspect of this map, and so I wouldn't agree that we hadn't done that. Okay. So in consideration with everything else that we looked at in drawing these districts.
All right, last light, Representative Mayo.
Thank you. Were the 49 districts the basis, the foundation for drawing the entire map? Did it begin with those 49?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
We did look at those to see if we could create 49 districts, but the map was a culmination of all these districts being looked at and being massaged and worked on and everything, not just the 49, and they were not the basis for this map.
And then the final thing I'd like to ask, the pairings are obviously very sensitive, and there are a lot of people who will be affected, voting citizens as well as some incumbents. And my question would be, are you able to walk us through particularly the metro pairings and just sort of explain the logic or the rationale as to how we ended up with those pairings and why those individuals were put together?
Well, I think it's a combination of the legal requirements, partially, the Voting Rights Act and the one person, one vote, having to get those districts up to 53,820 in population and comply with the Voting Rights Act. And then considering the other factors, communities of interest, the county lines, precincts, and all those issues. So they're a result of that.
Board, that's pretty standard with each one.
I think it's pretty standard with the Fulton and DeKalb County districts that are paired up. You've got with a line from DeKalb over into Fulton County, 15 miles. You've got 15 incumbents that live close to that line. And if you lost population, you got to grow in geography. It's inevitable that with incumbents being that close together, that they're going to wind up being residents of the same district.
Mm-hmm.
Almost has to because the population is not there, and all the incumbents live there. These districts are not drawn for the incumbents; they're drawn for the folks in those districts. And sometimes we happen to wind up with two incumbents living in those districts. But so that would be my response to that.
Thank you.
You have no more questions, Mr. Chairman.
With that, I would ask at the appropriate time that we consider this matter, and I'll come back up there if you don't mind.
Yes,
You're doing
sir.
a great job, and I kind of enjoy sitting down here watching
happy
all y'all
happy
work.
to relinquish the chair.
Okay, thanks.
We'll start on the public sign-up list. Do we have? Let's see, and we'll take the. We'll start with the House members that are signed up first in the order in which they're signed up, and we'll start with Representative Spencer, if he's here.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And distinguished
Thank you.
members of this committee, I know you've all have worked very hard on this process. I'd also like to ask for permission for Representative Hatfield. We have worked on this proposal to be here as well to present this proposal. I submit today a substitute to House Bill 1EX, and I'm calling it the Spencer substitute. Basically, in this proposal, it basically deals with the southeast corner of the state, southeast Georgia. In the current proposal, in the current substitute, I'd like to distribute some data packets of our current proposal to the committee. Would you mind doing that? And in this packet is the data set for the new proposal that we have drawn together. There is a colored map, and adjoining that map, attached to it, is the current House districts that we currently serve in southeast Georgia. So when you get that data packet, that will show our proposal. If you look at the current proposal as is, there is some concern that geography has not been taken into consideration in southeast Georgia when making this map. Geography is a big component when you're starting to redistrict in South Georgia. It's rural, especially in southeast Georgia. You have a large natural boundary called the Okefenokee Swamp, and that does separate some communities of interest. In particular, House District 174, that's in the current substitute, comes from Lowndes County and goes across 5 counties and across the Okefenokee Swamp and into Camden County. That is a very large geographic district and has several communities there. And from my district standpoint, Camden County is a coastal community. We have very little in common with Statenville and Homerville and those other communities across the other side of the Okefenokee and even Waycross. Camden County does not share the same interest as the interior counties in the southeastern portion of the state. We do not even play football with some of these counties. As you know, Camden's got one of the best football programs in the state. However, I will say that we do play Charlton County in football in scrimmages. Years ago, Charlton County was carved out of Camden County in 1855, I believe, or 1854. So we do have a community of interest there in Charlton. So what I'm proposing today is the Spencer substitute. I have the substitute available. If you want to look at that actual bill. What this does, it makes it more compact when compared with the current substitute. And I believe you do keep communities of interest together, and you also preserve the minority district that is being created there in Central South or Central Lowndes County, and basically Valdosta, Georgia. In that minority district, you still have a minority majority at 50.07%. The Democratic voters there is about, I believe it's about 58%. I grew up in Berrien County, Georgia, so I have a little knowledge of how Lowndes County is sort of set up. You do have a lot of progressives around the Valdosta State University area. That is a Democratic rich voting bloc there, and I still believe that our proposal keeps that intact. So this proposal only involves 4 people, representatives, myself, Representative Mark Hatfield, Representative Jason Shaw out of Lanier County, and Representative Ellis Black out of Southern Lowndes County. So we have talked to these individuals. We have gotten their perspective on this proposal, and I will take any questions that you may have.
Any questions? See if you did not.
What kind of steps and analysis was done to ensure that the plan that you've proposed complies with the Voting Rights Act?
We believe that we sat down with the redistricting folks in the reapportionment offices. They're the ones who drew this map. It's not drawn by an outside source. So they compiled the data and kept it into the standard deviation that they require to keep that district a minority district. And he's got an answer to that question as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Representative Mark Hatfield, I represent all of Ware County and all of Charlton County. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on this. Excuse me. Can't hear me? Okay. Is that better? Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before the committee on this matter of great importance to all Georgians and this matter of great importance specifically to my area of the state, which is southeast Georgia. Mr. Chairman, we have concerns about as you know, we have concerns in southeast Georgia about the way the lines were drawn with regard to the Camden County, Charlton, Ware, Clinch, all the way over to Lowndes County. We have, first of all, the proposed District 180, which would feature a pairing between myself and Representative Spencer, would begin in Ware County, pick up approximately 10,000 people in Ware, pick up approximately 800 across the top of Charlton, and then contain 42,000 people in Camden County. That is a tremendous size as far as the physical size of the proposed district. It's also leaves it puts two areas together, Camden and Ware, that really are not a community of interest. Camden's interests are much more aligned with the coastal areas, such as you represent, Mr. Chairman. Ware County is, of course, inland and has much more is much more identified with the rural part of the state, and has really entirely different demographics and areas of interest in it to its citizenry. Then we have a district that is essentially beginning in Lowndes County, where Representative Ellis Black resides at this time, and it goes through Eccles County, picks up Clinch County, and then picks up the southern part of Ware County, goes and picks up the remainder of Charlton County, and all the way into the southwest of Camden, Kingsland area. That's a district, Mr. Chairman, that I would suggest is approximately, to drive through that, best estimate would be approximately 2 hours. You could not drive directly through that district all the way through because there's a swamp down there, as you know. And it is a very, to look at the district, it's a very, well, I guess it's a disjointed district, I guess it would be my way of describing it. Respectfully, I think that district aligns a number of communities that really do not represent a community of interest. Let's look at for example, the Lowndes County area and the Ware County area have really very little in common. There are, I would say this, and Representative Black's on the committee, and I would think that he would probably have some input into this, but that the Lowndes County and Ware County area in many respects have some competing interests, such as with regard to our hospitals. You know, our hospital in Waycross is a regional hospital. There have been times, particularly in the past, when there was a certificate of need issue that came up with respect to doing open heart surgery in Waycross. We were not able to get a certificate of need in Waycross, despite having an overwhelming need for it, because we were opposed by hospitals in both Valdosta and over in Glenn County, which has their system has a satellite down in Camden County. So we've got some very significant issues there, and I will go a little bit further than that and tell you this: our hospital, without having a certificate of need, sends most of our patients down to Jacksonville, Florida. So we still have those issues coming up with regard to the medical community even today. But this is a situation where the people in Ware County look at this and they say, we've got somebody as far away as Lowndes County that potentially we will be represented by, that will be making decisions with regard to our local issues, but have a competing set of interests, or another word of saying it would be a conflict of interest for any representative who held that seat. Then we've got the proposed District 176, which would stretch from Lowndes County, northeastern Lowndes County, through Lanier County, which is where Representative Jason Shaw resides in the small town of Lakeland, and then Atkinson County, and picks up the northern, or probably the most populous area of Ware County. Again, that puts Waycross and Ware County basically in the position of being represented by somebody who has allegiances to Lowndes County. And there, Mr. Chairman, I know this committee didn't have anything to do with it, but a few years ago, this body, and I was here when this happened, you were here, we, at the urging of the governor, realigned the regional development center districts. And one of the consequences of that at that time was we had a regional development center in Waycross, which was the actual hub of that district for many, many years. But as a result of that realignment, which was approved by the General Assembly, our regional development center then was located in Valdosta, and they had just built a new building there in Waycross and everything to house our center. So now we're in a regional development center area with Valdosta. Well, the hits keep on rolling because as a result of that, as you know, with the proposed transportation tax vote that we would have coming up, the roundtable has to come together on a list of projects. We don't have the same voice in Waycross and Ware County as those do in Valdosta with regard to the projects that are on the list and would be included in that in the vote that's put before the voters. And our local officials come to me and are just bemoaning the fact that we're really sort of being left behind on a lot of these issues, like transportation, like other economic development issues, and we're sort of, in the shadow of a bigger community like Valdosta that we really do not need to be paired with. And I would just, I've made this argument before with regard to some of these other matters, but I feel very strongly that I need to say this again respectfully to this committee today, that Ware County does not want to be paired up with Valdosta. We would like to have the chance to make our own way in the world and have a chance to have a representative that comes from Ware County. I don't think there's ever been a time in history that Ware County, in the history of our county, that Ware County has not had a representative in either the Georgia House of Representatives or in the Georgia State Senate. But under these proposed lines, Ware County would very likely not be able to elect any representative to the Georgia House of Representatives. We are in a Senate district that is ever expanding, contains about 10 to 12 counties, and obviously right now we're not represented by a senator from Ware County. So we are looking at the prospect of literally having no representation, no voice at all in the House or the Senate. And my constituents are very concerned about that. I know I have been an outspoken advocate on a lot of issues. Sometimes there have been issues that those of us in the General Assembly have butted heads on, but I've always acted with you in good faith, and I've always told the truth when I've talked to you about issues, and I'm telling you the truth now, that we just, in Ware County, we're concerned. We'd like to have a voice here, whether it's mine or someone else's. We'd like to have some ability to have an impact at the state level. And I say that very respectfully. Mr. Chairman, my constituents have serious issues with these lines, and that's why Representative Spencer and I have taken the time, and I would say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. McDonald with the redistricting office and making sure that we had the time to come together and be able to present an alternative. I appreciate the leadership making that possible for us to be able to present an alternative and give the House an opportunity to consider other options. What we have come up with, I would submit, if I may, is a very viable alternative, and one that preserves not only communities of interest, but it preserves counties, it preserves precincts, and it preserves our common interests in terms of economic interests and social interests in the area of southeast Georgia. As you can see on the Spencer proposal, Camden County would be kept whole, and it would be joined by a small portion of Charlton County, about 3,600 residents there, excuse me, that would come in to make a complete district. Then Charlton County, the remainder of that, which is currently in my district, would remain in my district, and Ware County would be able to be kept whole. And additionally, Atkinson County would be put into my district, the whole of that. All three of those counties are very closely aligned, have a lot of the same sorts of economic interests, and particularly rural agricultural sort of interests that we share. Representative Shaw in the proposed 176th district, who lives in Lanier County, would also have Clinch County put back into his district. My understanding, and I'm not authorized to or attempting to speak for Representative Shaw here today, but my understanding is that Representative Shaw would like to have Clinch County as part of his district, as it has traditionally been part of his district. And so this would restore Clinch County to his district and would also provide the whole of Eccles and then a significant portion of Lowndes, which brings us then to Representative Black and that District 174 as proposed. And Representative Black and Representative Spencer and I have discussed this, and I'm sure Representative Black can speak for himself about what he thinks about the proposal, but this would basically, it would draw Representative Black into the majority-minority district. Now, I understand the reasoning for drawing a majority-minority district there, which would center in Valdosta, and can appreciate that. The thing about it, though, in looking at what's really fair about this situation, Representative Black, for better or worse, is a resident of Lowndes County, and that is his natural constituency there in Lowndes County. So he would have a district that is entirely within Lowndes County. He would have the advantage, I would say, of not being paired up with anyone, and this would be a proposal, as you can see, that would result in no pairings in this area. So I believe that there is ample reason to think that this is a good proposal. And then when you look at this map aesthetically and from the standpoint of the considerations that the map drawers, that each of you need to take into consideration about the numbers and how well it fits in with the overall map, this map looks better, I would submit, than the proposal that we have for that region in the current map. And I believe that it is a fair proposal. It takes account of a couple of rules that this committee has adopted that I think, and I agree, Mr. Chairman, are important. One, it keeps together, it respects county boundaries, it respects communities of interest, it respects precinct boundaries, it respects city boundaries. Secondly, that it avoids the unnecessary pairing of incumbents. And I have heard it said, Mr. Chairman, that it was literally not possible, it was humanly not possible to draw this area in a way that did not result in a pairing of incumbents. But what we have here before us in this proposal is a map that does comply with the Voting Rights Act. It is it is less than 1% deviation, which is the target that this committee has set. This will continue to be, 174 would be a majority-minority district, although it's very close in number. It would provide a fair opportunity for any incumbent in the district, particularly Representative Black, to run in. And it is basically it's a map that looks like it is doing the right thing, because I know each of you on this committee, friends with all of you, and I know that one thing that you are all about and we're all about is doing the right thing at the end of the day, and trying to make sure that our constituents are treated fairly. And so, as humbly as I can, and as respectfully as I can, I ask you to take into consideration this alternative, which avoids pairing any incumbents, and it gives everyone a fair chance to have a representative that has an allegiance to their area, to their county, to their city. And it doesn't put representatives in the position of dealing with conflicts of interest. It doesn't present, for example, a representative in Valdosta or Lowndes County with the choice of having to choose between interests in Ware County and interests in Lowndes County. This is something that it seems to me that we want to try at all costs to avoid. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time that the committee has afforded us to present this map and this proposed alternative. I would respectfully request that the committee consider adopting this as an alternative map, although we have given you just a portion here. Of course, it is a full map of the state. It's offered as a substitute, and the map does not change anything other than just those 4 districts we've referred to. All other districts that surround those would be left exactly as they are in the committee plan. And I'll be glad to take any questions that the committee may have.
Let me ask you, the majority-minority district that you talked about in Valdosta and Lowndes County, under our current proposal, that is an open minority district.
Yes, sir.
All right. And under your proposal, it puts Representative Black coming into that majority-minority district.
Yes, sir.
And would you agree with me that changes the makeup of that district as far as for voting rights purposes?
No, Mr. Chairman, I really would not agree with you to the extent that if you look at the district right now, the area that has been made into the majority-minority district is currently represented by Representative Amy Carter. Now, Representative Amy Carter, we all know, was elected as a Democrat in that district, and now she is a Republican. But at the time that she was elected, she was elected from that very area that has now been drawn into a minority majority status. And so I would submit to the chairman that this area and the minority-majority district would be in no different situation with regard to representation as it is today were our map adopted.
Okay. Number 13. Someone down there got their buzzer on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative.
My question, a couple. Dealing with, well, I heard you say something about the pairing of incumbents that is not necessary. So if that's so, then wouldn't you say diminishing the voting power of a majority-minority district would be unnecessary as well, wouldn't it?
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Okay. You said something about pairing incumbents was unnecessary in that area that you're in.
Well, I'm just saying that the committee rules say that you're to avoid, this is the committee's rules that you've adopted, that you're to avoid the unnecessary pairing of incumbents.
Okay. But looking at what I've seen of your plan, I would say that diluting the M&M of the voting power for the people in Valdosta and areas like that, because it would be diluting it. Wouldn't? Okay. If they've created a majority-minority district, an open seat, and you're going to give it to somebody that's already in the legislature, just give it to them to create your seat where there's no pairing because you're an incumbent.
Well,
is that right or wrong?
If they were to, if this committee were to draw the lines to leave them and leave them essentially where they are today, then that area, that even if you drew it as a majority-minority area, would be represented by Representative Amy Carter.
That's a female, right?
Yes, ma'am. But I'm respectfully, I'm not here to argue your battles about the rest of the state. I am here to make a point about our limited area and the people that we represent. And I do feel like that there are points that are being raised that need to be looked at, of course. But I don't agree with the premise that our proposal in any way dilutes any minority voting rights. On the contrary, the way that there's a minority-majority district drawn in there now would most likely result in an African American or a minority person being elected to that seat, and that's why I assume that Representative Black probably is not crazy about this proposal. But nevertheless, it's not a matter of dilution. I mean, I think it does exactly the opposite. It gives the minority a chance to put someone in that seat.
Is that it? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment on the proposed 174 majority-minority. I want to deal with facts, so I want you guys go to the page 12 and look at the percentages. It says percent black is 53.33%, and the VAP under that number is 49.39%, and the deviation is 0.62%. Those are the numbers, and it says the total black percentage for VAP in that proposed minority district is 50.07%. Again, there's other political issues to deal with in this district. Again, you will have some white progressives in this district that will vote Democrat. And it is a majority Democrat district, and it's also by definition of the fact, by looking at the number, it is a majority minority district. So this is a Democrat-friendly district. We have not, I think we are well within compliance with the Voters' Rights Act and into the political wishes of this region.
Okay. Thank both of you for the work you put in and for the job you've done on this, and we'll take it up at appropriate time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next will be Representative Ed Setzler. Okay. We appreciate your input. Next will be Representative Stacey Abrams, Minority Leader of the Georgia House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I want to begin first by thanking you and the committee members. We may not all agree on the results of this process, but I don't think anyone can doubt the commitment that you've shown to a difficult and complicated process and your willingness to be open. I come before you today to offer our substitute, the Abrams substitute, to HB 1EX. But before I get into that presentation, we're gonna hand out copies of the proposal, as well as we have some larger maps we can hang. But I did want to respond. I see that Mr. Lindsay is back. I want to respond to some of his concerns about timing and calendars this year. I was invited for the first time to meet with the Speaker and with yourself on July 22nd, which was a Friday. We did have, I think, a very good conversation, a very fruitful conversation. You indicated at that time that there were 6 or so pairings, and you gave me a list of 7 members. I wanted a more complete list, and you offered to provide that to me the following week. I was not able to be here because of a long-standing commitment that had me out of town that next week, but I did ask Representative Hughley to make herself available. I believe she attempted to schedule time to meet with you, and that wasn't possible. And so the earliest time for a meeting that was set for August 3rd. On August 3rd, she did meet with you. I did not, because I had a death in the family and was not able to make it to that meeting. August 4th, the Democratic Caucus completed a series of rural hearings. And to tie this together, while we certainly do appreciate the 12 hearings that were held across the state, we heard at every one of those hearings, because we did have strong membership in attendance, there were grave concerns about the lack of rural hearings and also concerns about the timing of the hearings and the locations. And so we initiated, but certainly invited, the entire Republican caucus to join us in a series of rural hearings. It was the position of the Democratic caucus from the outset of this process that we believed maps should be drawn with full community input and with full understanding of the guidelines. That input did not occur and was not completed until mid-July. And so at that time, in fact, upon the completion of those hearings, after our community members, after our legislators had received the community input, they then began attending hearings. Some came to the Office of Reapportionment earlier, but certainly everyone was asked to go and participate. Had we been told in any written communication that there was a deadline for input, we certainly would have made people available earlier, but the only deadlines we received was the listing of hearings, the 12 hearings, and so we took those hearings to be the deadline for receiving community input before the hard work of building these maps occurred. But to return to the timetable, on July 22nd I met with your office. On August 3rd, the whip of the House Democratic Caucus met with you and received, I think, some fairly startling information about the composition of the proposed map. August 4th, we completed the rural hearings, and it was on that day and at that time that we began to react to the maps. On August 12th, we finally received a final version, and certainly with lacking the full resources of this body, it may have taken us a couple of extra days to turn around a map that we believed we were hopeful that the map that was presented by this body would it would comport with the Voting Rights Act, that it would meet the obligations of the guidelines, that it would, more than anything, meet the obligations of this body to serve the people of the state. And when we found that that was not true, we determined that it was necessary to present an alternative plan. We are, at no time have we objected to the responsibility of the majority caucus to maximize their political gain. That is the way the rules work in Georgia, and we understand that. We also certainly understand that there were bad actions by my predecessors. I was not here at the time. I think I just graduated from law school, so I hope I won't be held accountable. I will tell you, though, that no prior bad actions can be a defense for current bad action. I think also that the argument of openness and transparency, while certainly progress, has to be, I think, contextualized. Cracking open a blind on a window is not the same as openness and transparency, and whispering a little bit louder than the time before is not the same as making sure everyone can hear you. North Carolina, I believe, has shown us a pathway to true transparency and openness. They have posted their maps before every hearing. They've had full community engagement. They have allowed community members to go online for the course of a 3-month process. And I believe that that is something that both technology and our obligations as legislators should lead us to. I certainly would have offered that comment had I been included on this committee, but unlike apparently the majority of the Republican leadership, no member of the Democratic leadership was invited to serve on this committee in either an official or an ex officio capacity. And so we have to offer these comments in the time that we are allowed. With that said, let me walk you through the maps that we have presented. We begin with the understanding that we have to adhere to the guidelines of this committee, but more than that, we have the obligation of the Constitution first, the U.S. Constitution, then the Georgia Constitution, and the Federal Voting Rights Act. We recognize that constitutionality is above all, that the statutory obligations of the Voting Rights Act are necessary and must be met, but we want to absolutely ensure that we do nothing that is not in complete comport with the Constitution. If you look at the guidelines adopted by this committee, I will walk you through each of those guidelines. When you look at population, each of the 180 House districts are drawn with total population within plus or minus 1% of the ideal district size. The largest maximum deviation of any district is 539 people, which is plus 1, and the minimum deviation is 533 people, which is minus 1%. This map also complies with the Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended and the U.S. and Georgia constitutions. Currently, Georgia has 41 House districts with a black voting age population greater than 50%, and an additional 21 districts have a black voting age population between 35% and 49.9%. A very thorough view of not only the Voting Rights Act, but all of the ancillary case law and the amendments that have been made demonstrate that there can be consideration given not only to majority-minority districts with 50 plus 1%, but also to crossover districts, those districts with between about 35 and 49%. And we looked at both of those because those together, I believe, are the best metrics of the strength of minority voting. This group of 15 districts, we have offered then 43 districts in the draft plan with a black voting age population greater than 50%. And we offer an additional 15 districts with 35 to 49.9%. This group of 15 includes an opportunity district that's created in Valdosta with a black voting age population equal to 48.7%. As I believe you all encountered, the greatest obstacle to maintaining majority African American status in many of the districts was due to statewide shifts in population that left many districts below the ideal population. However, consistent with the Voting Rights Act, no district with a current black voting age population of at least 50% falls below that level. However, we decided to incorporate into our understanding of the necessity of black voting age population also a realization that communities of interest cannot be ignored, and there is no mandate that communities of interest be ignored. We believe that the maps have to reflect the needs of the voters, and those needs extend beyond and include their racial considerations, but they also include their communities of interest. We also looked for maps that had districts that were composed of contiguous geography. If you will look at our maps, they are all compact by and large. We have attempted to the greatest degree possible to maintain communities of interest, and as a point of interest, the request by Representatives Spencer and Hatfield are actually incorporated into this map. Districts 177 and 180 as proposed maintain the communities of interest in the contiguity of Camden County, Charlton County, and Ware County. We did not create multi-member districts as those are not permitted under our guidelines. We looked at the boundaries of counties and precincts to ensure that they were compact and respected communities of interest. And unlike the proposal that is before us as HB1EX, we do not have 191 split precincts, which is what we have determined exists in the proposed plan. The plan that we offer is composed of contiguous territory. The districts are built from reasonable county groupings and recognized communities of interest. Overall, the current district boundaries were used as the baseline, recognizing that the goal of the Voting Rights Act and the goal of redistricting is to allow members to select the candidate of their choice. And so we began with the baseline of existing communities of interest, some of which have existed for 100 years or more. We only add new territory when necessary to achieve the ideal population, but not ever for political purpose. Care was taken also not to split counties unnecessarily or cities, and thus we have, to the extent possible, constituted Athens Clarke County, and precincts were split only when necessary to balance population. We have corrected, I think, the unnecessary division of counties, the unnecessary division of cities, and we attempted in this map to maintain as much as possible the communities of interest as they existed during the 2010 election and as they have existed during the last 10 years. The map also avoids the unnecessary pairing of incumbents. Incumbent pairings were dictated by regional population trends only and occur only where it is evident that the population present could not sustain the existing districts. There was no pattern of racial targeting of incumbents, no pattern of gender targeting of incumbents, and we saw no evidence and no issue other than the population necessity for incumbent pairings. Rather than the 20 incumbents paired under the existing plan, the current plan proposal, we've been able to minimize that to only 6 pairings. What I would point you to, and I know that there's been conversation raised before about what happened in the 2001 map, 47%. I think the courts have adequately addressed that issue, but I will say that by comparison, this map targets 20% of the Democratic caucus and only pairs 7% of the Republican caucus. However, our proposal results only in 12 pairings, 12 people being paired, and of that 12, only 3.45% are from the GOP party, and only 3.17% are Democrats. So we have parity in the pairings. Each group faces and offers the same amount of risk. We create a number of open seats, 6 of them. Of those 6 open seats, 5 are GOP open seats, 1 is a Democratic open seat. We do not attempt to maximize at all Democratic representation in this body. We recognize the GOP's dominance. We recognize that as it's currently constituted, you have an obligation to maximize, but we attempt to the greatest extent possible to avoid anything that could be violative of the Voting Rights Act. Our proposed map creates 5 safe GOP seats and 1 open Democratic seat, and does so in a way that we believe fairly represents the state of Georgia and the voters of Georgia. We have proposed a map that maintains a strong GOP majority, avoids unnecessary incumbent pairings, preserves communities of interest, is compact, and fully meets the obligations of the Voting Rights Act. More than that, we believe that in reaction to the proposal that is HB 1EX, it proves that the egregious effects of that proposed plan is not necessary. It does not purge white Democrats as the proposed plan does. Our proposal does not isolate minority voters by destroying communities of interest and coalitions. It does not allow for the destruction of crossover districts, which we believe has been one of the hallmarks of the state of Georgia. It meets the requirements of the Voting Rights Act in a thoughtful, consistent, and demonstrated manner that also recognizes the rising needs of the Latino populations in the state of Georgia. And it does not result in the political resegregation of the state of Georgia. We wholly and completely reject any notion that racial discrimination based on anyone's race is permissible, and whether the target is white, African American, or Latino, we reject that as any premise for the drawing of lines in the state of Georgia. We have offered an amendment, we have offered a substitute, because we believe that this body wants to do what's right for Georgia. We believe that this committee has committed itself to hearing the needs of the state, and we believe that it is possible to meet your needs of maximizing your political power without, we believe, harming the needs of the voters of Georgia. And so we offer the substitute for your consideration. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Abrams, I just have a few questions for you.
Certainly.
Let's start off with the issues regarding the Voting Rights Act. Underneath your plan, you have 43 majority-minority districts. Is that correct? And underneath the chairman's proposal, he has 49 majority-minority districts. Correct?
That's our understanding. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I know what a majority-minority district is, but I'll be honest with you. I've been looking long and hard, and I haven't found a definition for a crossover district. Could you please give us a definition so that we can figure out what should and should not fit into that category?
Well, I can do that and more. I think that let's begin with the underlying question, which is the number or the comparative between the number of majority-minority districts under this proposal.
Can we get the crossover district?
I'm going to. It's part of the answer. The Voting Rights Act requires that there not be any dilution of minority voting strength. Both case law and the Voting Rights Act and the amendments that have followed in 2006 have looked at the amalgamation of needs of minority communities. You have the baseline issue that creates a majority-minority district with 50% plus 1, but as your own map demonstrates, the number can drop below that. You have a number of black voting age populations of 48, 49%. Mm-hmm. What we consider a crossover district is a district where minority voters have the ability to coalition with other voters who are non-African American or non-minority in order to achieve the selection of the candidate of their choice. We reflect in your numbers that you achieve the same objective. What we looked at was the overall goal of the Voting Rights Act, which we believe is actually constitutional, which is to look at the effective voting strength of minorities. If you increase the number of minority districts but decrease the effectiveness of that population as in the aggregate by reducing overall the number of districts where they have the opportunity to create these multiracial coalitions, we believe this is in violation of both the spirit and the intent of the Voting Rights Act. I believe this is a certainly novel approach to diminishing minority voting. But the increase of numbers, we do not believe, actually achieves the effect intended by the Voting Rights Act, which is to allow minority voters to select the candidate of their choice.
Thank you, but you haven't answered my question.
I believe I did. Crossover districts are districts where you have less than 50%, but when they have the ability to build multiracial coalitions in order to elect the candidate of their choice, which is actually the language that's in the Voting Rights Act.
All right. Now, you would also agree, however, that packing minorities in particular districts can, in the overall scheme, lead to a dilution of minorities' impact on state policy, correct?
I agree.
How many districts do you have in your plan that have over, for instance, 70% African American
Do you want to use your number, your 70%,
Your
or
number.
our
Yours.
70%? I believe we have 4.
You have 4.
But in each of those, you have long-standing
I believe you have 6.
6. I
6.
apologize. You have 6 of them. And in each of those communities, you will find that you have long-standing histories of communities of interest that are also being protected. There's nothing in the Voting Rights Act that says that you cannot have more than 70%. In fact, I'm not certain where the number was derived from. But there's nothing in the Voting Rights Act or in statute that sets 70% as a number. What the statute requires is that you have majority-minority districts where you have effective voting strength. And those effective voting strengths should also respect communities of interest. So, for example, there are districts in Midtown and in-town Atlanta that have existed as communities of coalition for decades. They're communities of interest for decades. We do not believe that it is on its face impermissible to go above this arbitrary 70% number if the reason you've done so can be demonstrated by preserving communities of interest. What we do believe is impermissible is the packing of districts such as which occurred in my district, which is to add African Americans in order to create an artificial number of majority-minority districts at the expense of existing communities of interest.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And we believe that that is actually packing. Packing is not simply how many you have, it's why you have them there.
Good.
And what we can demonstrate is that you don't have to have them there simply in order to maximize political gain, that they should be there because they represent communities of interest or because they happen to buy a house next to somebody they liked.
Now, we had to add voters to your district
Yes.
because you had one of the 10 smallest by population house districts in the state. That's why you got added, correct? Your area got added.
I believe so. I
Constitutionally, we had to do that for one person, one vote.
I'm not certain why my district was preserved in the way it was preserved. In fact, I did not participate in asking for my district to be drawn in any particular way because I don't think that my district matters in the larger scheme of things.
Okay.
The goal has to be to preserve the needs of the voters of the state of Georgia, and my goal is, I think, is inconsequential in that pursuit.
Well, let's take a look at your communities of interest.
Certainly.
And I'm going to sort of use, I'm glad Representative Beasley Teague is still here. Let's take a look, for instance, at House District 56.
And the proposal from our map?
Your map.
Okay.
House District 56 runs from northwest Buckhead, which Representative Beasley Teague has already sort of given you a general idea of its community of interest. And where does it end? Where's the south end of that district?
I did not memorize each district, but
if you have somebody, you can feel free to ask a friend behind you.
I'm happy to ask a friend, but can you tell me what the point of the question is?
The point of the question is I'd like to know the south end of the district, and then I'll, if I can.
Do you want me to bring someone up here to sit with me, or
yes,
do you?
Yeah, because I'll have several such districts I want to ask you about.
Brett Blythe, if you can come and join me. I've asked Brett Blythe, who has been assisting us in the drawing of these maps, in addition to the Reapportionment Committee.
Now,
if you'll give us a moment,
I will. If you pull up your map, but let me sort of tell them where we're going. Sure. Northwest Buckhead is up in the northwest corner of the city of Atlanta. It's in an old area of Buckhead that's been long recognized as a community of interest. I'm just sort of curious where the south end of 56 goes. And I'm sorry I'm having to go into such detail, but at this time, this is the first time that we have seen these maps, correct?
We understand the difficulty of evaluating maps with very little time to look at them.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for a little respect, and let me also point out that as opposed to these maps, our maps were put out last Friday. And, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the crowd be admonished yet again.
Yeah, we've already had to ask once that the interchange between members be allowed to be conducted without any audible participation from the crowd. There's a public sign-up sheet. Anybody that wants to offer anything to the committee will have an opportunity to do so. But again, we're getting very close to the point where we're going to have to ask the security to come in and escort anybody out that can't live within those rules of allowing there to be an exchange between members on what is a extremely important matter for the citizens of Georgia.
Now, getting back to my question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, where's the southern end of House District 56?
Cascade Road.
Cascade Road. And you've already heard Representative Teague sort of admonish that that kind of long line from the Cascade area to Buckhead, even to the southern edge of Buckhead, didn't represent to her a community of interest. You heard that testimony earlier, didn't you?
I did hear her.
Yeah. So the same type of concerns that Representative Beasley Teague had about the community's interest would also apply to 56, correct?
Only if those communities believe that they can't be fairly represented as whole communities of interest.
Yeah.
I do believe it is entirely possible for communities of interest to be held in their entirety, but to have multiple communities of interest sit within a single district.
Okay.
For example, I represent Druid Hills, East Lake, Kirkwood, Candler Park, Lake Claire, and South DeKalb. I believe each of those communities of interest were maintained in their whole state. I represented all of those communities of interest, and so it's not simply a question of do you have communities of interest that are elongated. The question is, are they effectively contained as communities of interest?
Yeah. Well, you would agree that a long, thin district from Buckhead to Cascade is a pretty long district, a pretty narrow district, correct?
I would say that this district does not appear to me to be a thin district. I think it's a long district. I would wonder and would certainly be happy to evaluate exactly how much terrain is required and if any of the communities of interest that exist along this corridor, all of which I believe is contained within the city of Atlanta, feels that it can be represented effectively.
So you would say that districts that are contained wholly within the city of Atlanta, even if they are relatively narrow in width but long, would be communities of interest.
I believe you have to look at a case-by-case basis, and in this case, looking at 56, I do not see that 56 would be violative of any requirement.
I think the people in Northwest Buckhead may disagree, but we'll move on.
And I believe that their disagreement should be heard.
Yeah. Now let's look at, but similarly regarding, I heard complaints regarding these similar districts. Senate District 58, where's the northern edge of 58?
I believe House District. It's Far Road.
Far Road?
It's the Far Road that exists in DeKalb County, not the Far Road that exists in North Buckhead.
Well, that's in Fulton County, though.
Well, part of this Far Road travels from Fulton County into DeKalb County, but it's in fact I currently represent part of Far Road.
Okay. And the southern end of 58?
On the Fulton side, it's Venetian Drive, and on the I think on the other side, it's Long Street.
Okay. So on the southern end of Atlanta, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We have similar large numbers. We have several districts that you've drawn that are only one precinct wide, correct?
That may be
one
so.
Or two precinct wide, correct?
I believe that is a defect in both maps, yes.
Okay. And the defect that you mentioned in both maps, and you can also find similar such lines in DeKalb County, down into Clayton County, and in other areas, correct? Cobb County as well.
I believe that in the drawing of these maps, to the extent possible, they are at least two precincts wide. There may be examples, but we'd be happy to evaluate and give you a full list and reporting later.
And the defect that and that's your word, I believe it was, that you cited, that was the result of trying to draw districts that were in compliance with the Voting Rights Act, correct?
I believe our intent was to meet all of the obligations of drawing these maps: equal protection, the Voting Rights Act, the constitutions, all of those things.
Okay.
We did not use a single metric to determine how these districts were drawn.
Well, I don't think any other similar metrics were used either. But my point being that Voting Rights Act was certainly a concern of y'all's, correct?
I think it's a concern of every citizen of Georgia.
Yeah. But in looking at the maps overall, you would agree that there are several, and Representative Mayo and others raised concerns regarding long, thin districts, and we have within your proposed maps long, thin districts as well, correct?
I believe that what I would compare are the number of long, thin districts and what was maximized within those districts on behalf of voters. What we attempted to do was to make certain that we contained whole communities of interest, that we did not unnecessarily target incumbents. We considered a variety of factors. I believe Representative Mayo's questions went to determining which factors were used. We are clear about our factors. We were unclear about the factors that were used to determine your maps.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. The mere fact that a district is long and thin by and of itself does not, in your opinion, violate the law, correct?
I would say, again, I believe a variety of factors have to be understood, and if the effect and underlying intent is impermissible, the long-thin district is impermissible.
Well, my question was just the opposite. The mere fact that a district is long and thin does not necessarily make it violative of the law, correct?
I would leave that to a court to decide.
Well, you drew these maps.
And we do not have any maps that we believe are violative of the overall requirements of the Voting Rights Act, the U.S. Constitution, or the State of Georgia Constitution.
Thank you. And neither do we, by the way. Let me see. I believe that's all I have.
Vice Chairman Ramsey.
Just a couple of follow-up questions, and Representative Lindsay asked a lot of the questions I wanted to ask. I just kind of jotted down numbers of districts, since a lot of the members of the committee, Representative Mayo and others, had a lot of questions about long, thin districts, and I'd noticed 94, 65, 66, 50, 56. I'm talking about y'all's map right now. 77, 80, 56, 48, 93, 92, 59, 69, 41, just a few that would kind of have that long, thin look to them. And you testified that it was drawn to preserve communities of interest. Can you define for me what a community of interest is from your perspective that you used to guide you in drawing these maps?
What we used to guide us were a variety of factors that have been found permissible by the courts. We also use factors that were raised by community members during these hearings. Communities of interest can include anything from school districts to city council districts. They can include neighborhood associations. They can include the language minorities that may exist in a community. They can include historical units that have begun to work together. We believe there are a variety of factors, which is why we thought it was important to ensure that as many members in the state of Georgia had an opportunity to testify before lines were drawn for any of these maps.
Well, I guess a couple of districts kind of jump out to me because they're in an area that I'm very familiar with. What's the community of interest between College Park and Peachtree City?
I believe that the communities of interest that exist between College Park and Peachtree City.
Is there? I'm sorry. Let me give a little more specificity to that question. I mean, there's no shared school districts. There's no shared neighborhood. We obviously have a shared language. I'm not sure there's any historical units, which is something you cited that would be relevant. So I guess I'm curious.
I'm happy to respond. The support of communities of interest does not mean that the entire district has to be a single community of interest. The goal is not to divide communities of interest and put them in separate districts so that they do not have adequate representation. So, for example, splitting a community in half, putting them into two separate districts, that would be a violation of communities of interest in our estimation. The fact that you may have multiple communities of interest, and this was the answer I was trying to give to Representative Lindsay, you may have multiple communities of interest that are served by a single district, but the goal is to ensure that the way the district is drawn, that those communities of interest are held whole.
Would you consider Peachtree City a community of interest?
If the citizens of Peachtree City consider themselves so, yes.
And you split it apart and put it in a district with College Park?
I believe that
in a long, skinny district.
Again, my point would be twofold. One, to the extent possible, we preserved communities of interest, and we believe we did so in greater proportion than the proposed HB 1EX. Secondly, that to the extent possible, we minimized how many of those communities of interest found themselves divided. Now, certainly, I think both in your maps and in the maps that we proposed, not everyone can be made perfectly happy, but the goal is to minimize harm. And I think that the minimization of harm is much greater in our map than in the maps that you proposed. Moreover, what the Voting Rights Act looks at is not simply single districts. It looks at the overall impact of the voting capacity of voters, one person, one vote, but it also looks at the state map. And we believe that overall, in totality, our map is preferable and indeed meets the obligations and standards to a greater extent than the maps that were proposed, because we were not attempting to achieve a supermajority. We were simply attempting to achieve maintenance of existing districts and their representation, recognizing, however, that a number of districts that previously had been represented by Democrats were lost due to party switchers, which we did not object to. We simply wanted to ensure that overall the maps in the state of Georgia, the ones that we adopt for the next decade, fairly and adequately represent the 42% minorities who live in the state, represents those communities of interest that have long held and have been working together for decades, represents the multiracial coalitions that have been able to be built in the state of Georgia over the last 46 years, and that more than anything that we met the guidelines set by this committee.
And well, I think what I heard in that answer is that given the number of factors, and you talked about asking communities what they think a community of interest. Well, a community of interest is really in the eye of the beholder. If the person that lives, the people that live in that community, in terms of articulating what a community of interest is.
I think that's true, because the whole point of this is to provide voters with the opportunity to represent their communities. So it's important to hear those communities tell us what they believe their interests are.
Right. And I think I also heard in that answer that you suggested that in your map and our map, that there are many people that are going to believe their communities of interest on your map and on our map were broken apart based on that person's own unique perspective as to what a community of interest is.
I believe that it's entirely possible to look at aggregated data to determine how close you can get.
Okay. Just a couple more quick questions, if I could. My mic's still on. Is there a number on the number of minorities? Is there a percentage number that to set as a baseline for a crossover district?
Effectively, crossover districts, majority minority districts are 50% plus one. We believe an effective crossover district has been demonstrated to be between 35% and 49.9%.
Okay, and who could? And then you talked about that percentage then has an opportunity to coalesce with other minorities, or who all can be a part of that coalition that you talked about to combine with that 35 to 49%.
To use an example that's happening in the Senate right now, George Hooks, who has represented a community for decades, he serves in a 42% a district that has 42% majority minority population. However, the goal is to allow that minority to elect the candidate of their choice. Those members have coalitioned with other members in that community to consistently elect him. We believe that crossover districts have demonstrated themselves to be areas where majority communities or minority communities can work together with the majority community to elect the person of their choice.
But who can be a part of that coalition?
It can be any group of voters as long as the minority voice can be heard. For example, I believe Carl Von Epps currently represents a district that could be considered a crossover district. He has a population that coalitions to elect him. It's not a majority-minority district, but it is a district that can work together to elect Carl Von Epps and has done so for decades.
Are there any crossover districts that have elected Republicans?
I would dare say I think so. I think Mr. Talton is gone, but I would dare say Mr. Talton's district is probably comprised of people who work together to elect the candidate of their choice.
Okay, and so I guess my original question is, can anybody be a part of the coalition?
I believe we are the world. We can coalition together to
okay,
elect the people we need.
It just seems to be an incredibly ambiguous and impossible target. Are we talking about Republicans, Democrats? Are we talking about purely on racial grounds? Is it whites and blacks? Is it just minorities that can participate in this coalition that you're speaking about?
Multiracial coalitions require the inclusion of multiple races. We believe crossover districts begin with minority populations, but it allows those populations to work together with members of a majority population to elect the member of their choice.
So Caucasians can be part of the coalition as well.
In fact, that's part of our concern.
Okay.
The creation of these districts dilutes the ability for these multiracial coalitions to exist, because where they have existed, they have been eviscerated by the elimination of the white members who've been elected in some of these communities. But overall, through the packing of these districts, you eliminate the opportunity for multiracial coalitions.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Number 13. Pass. Number 28.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Minority Leader, I want to get back to the specificity that I'm trying to understand on your recent interpretation of the Voting Rights Act with respect to coalition and crossover districts. Can you give me the site from the Voting Rights Act where that specifically is intended, or even any case law with respect to that, or is that your interpretation?
Well, no, we had outside attorneys who assisted us. I actually requested this information from Ann Lewis, who's been hired by this body and has been paid for by the taxpayers of Georgia, but she has declined to provide me with any information.
Okay, so there is no specific site that you
there,
can...
there certainly are citations. I'd be happy to provide them at a later time.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess what you're saying then is if a crossover district benefits Democrats overall, it's required to create a majority district. But if it doesn't benefit Democrats overall, then it's not required. That's somewhat of a convenient contradiction.
I don't believe I made that comment at all. I did not refer to any partisanship. I simply referred to the minority status of the racial status of persons in those majority minority districts. That racial status is what is protected, not the partisan status. Now, so far, I've not been able to determine in the state of Georgia that you have sufficient minorities to create those crossover districts, but I'd be happy to see them because I believe that the voting rights of minorities are the intent of the Voting Rights Act, as is the integration of our voting population in the state of Georgia. But I do not care whether it's a Democrat or Republican. As I stated earlier, we did not intend, nor do we drive to increase our numbers through this map.
But I think what you did state, though, was that you wanted a crossover or a coalition, this new interpretation district, to allows some type of coalition. But what you're saying is benefits Democrats. I must have missed the part about the title of the Voting Rights Act where it said voting rights to elect Democrats only. I don't believe that's what it said.
I completely agree with you. I don't care about the partisan nature of these votes. My goal is to recognize and to protect minority voters. Now, if they choose from the candidates of their choice to select Democrats or Republicans, that is their prerogative. What we cannot as a body do is eviscerate and eliminate their ability to coalition. Now, so far in Georgia, Democrats have been seen to be the party of choice, but I believe that can change. I'm certain that we can do something to alienate folks as easily as any other party. But for now, these maps are designed to protect the individual voters. There is nothing in the Voting Rights Act that looks at partisanship, and there's nothing in our map that looks at partisanship, with the exception of ensuring that the candidates of choice that have been selected historically by these communities continue to have the right to make those selections.
Well, pardon me for being skeptical, but Democratic individuals claiming non-partisanship in redistricting after the experiences we've had is kind of like the Yankees getting upset about the Red Sox payroll.
Well, being from Mississippi, I don't really pay attention to Yankees very much, but I wasn't here in 2001.
Representative Lindsay.
Just real quick follow-up, if I may. You've heard the chairman and the various committee members, as a matter of fact, on both sides of the political aisle, speak of the fact that they came in and looked at their maps and looked at their particular regions and gave their input into their regions, both Republicans and Democrats. You heard that testimony, correct?
I did.
I'm just sort of curious how many Republicans had feedback into your map.
We have offered it, I think, today to 15 of them. And we would like to have that feedback. And because this is our first opportunity to bring it before this committee, because this is the first time this committee has convened since we have been able to pull these maps together, we are happy to take full advantage of the special session to allow everyone to have full and open and complete feedback to these maps.
So if I understand correctly, before you formulated your maps, let's more specifically, before these maps were formulated, the chairman's maps formulated, he offered, and in fact, just about every member of the House, both Republicans and Democrats, came in and looked at their regions before he formulated his map. I want to know, before you formulated your map, how many Republicans had input into your map?
I would actually disagree with the underlying premise of the question.
Can I have the question answered and then you can disagree?
Well, I can't answer the question because I don't think it's the right question. You said your premise is that that every person had a chance to have input before the maps were drawn. That's not true. And so we can't meet a standard that is not an existing standard. What I will say, though, is that what we did was go to all the hearings all the public hearings that were held. We attended every hearing, and then we extended the number of hearings so that when we drew these maps, we did not take into consideration political parties. We took into consideration the needs and the expressed wishes of the voters, because that's actually what this process should do. And upon receiving that information, and also upon receiving information about these proposed maps, we attempted to minimize harm, maximize good, and more than anything, respect the wishes of voters. That's what this map does.
Representative Abrams, my question is quite simple. And we'll let the testimony up till now stand as far as input from legislators on both sides of the political aisle in terms of the chairman's map. But let's just focus on your map. Before today, before you put together this map, how many Republicans had input into your map?
All of the Republicans who came to the public hearings and all of the Republicans who participated in the process that was created by this body.
How many Republicans saw the particular districts that you draw? How many Republicans saw the particular districts that you drew for them? For instance, I can tell you right now, this is the first time I've seen that you've got me going halfway into Sandy Springs. Now, how many other Republicans similarly did not see the districts you drew before today?
Mr. Lindsay, I believe the point you're trying to make is that as the minority party, we should have offered these maps as early as possible. The answer is we did. The earliest we could offer these maps was today, because the earliest we had full information for the offering of these maps was today. These maps have been provided after we were able to get them to reapportionment on Friday. We have put the information together and we are providing it, and we are happy to hold off on offering the substitute. If this committee decides to delay its actions, we will wait and we will give you as much opportunity to review these maps in total as we had to review those maps, which would be from Friday to Monday.
Let me simply, we're going to put an end to it here, but let me just state in regret that contrary to the chairman's map, in which folks were brought in from around the state to look at their particular maps and to look at their particular districts and comment on their districts and comment whether or not the districts should be changed, you never gave that same right or privilege to Republicans before you formulated your map. I know you don't want to answer that question, but that's the fact.
No, but Mr. Lindsay, I admitted that. But the point is the timing. You control the process. You control the maps. Thus, you had the ability to set the timing of it. We tried to meet not only the letter but the spirit of the process, and that meant waiting until we had full information. We are offering these maps today at the earliest possible opportunity. We would be happy to work with every Republican who wants to take a look at their district and offer changes. We believe this should be an open process, and we believe that we have a special session that can last at least 40 days if it takes that long. I'm not denying that you have not seen these maps before, but what I am saying is that as the majority party controlling the process, you showed us the maps when you had them. As the minority party trying to meet the process and trying to respond and offer us a substitute, we have provided maps as soon as we could. We are happy to work with you. We are happy to extend the time. We are happy to provide access to the maps and to the data we used. We are happy to do whatever it takes to ensure that overall the voters of Georgia, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, all have the representation in this body that they require for the next decade.
Thank you. The fact of the matter is you've had 3 months knowing the process, and you've chosen not to avail yourself of a more public and open process.
We're going to move on now, Representative. And we appreciate you. That's all the questions we have. We appreciate your input.
Thank you, Chairman Lane. And
thanks for being here.
With your permission, at the appropriate time, one of our colleagues will introduce a substitute. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll begin the public input part of this, public comment. And we've got a number of folks signed up, and we're about to run out of time. So we're going to ask that you try to hold yourself to 1 minute so that we can get everybody have an opportunity to give us input. And we're going to start with Eugene Ray. Well, I think I can get you try it.
Hello?
Is it working? Yeah.
Oh. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Eugene Ree, and I'm from the Center for Pan-Asian Community Services. And I'm speaking on behalf of Chairwoman Kim, CEO for the Center, and for our clients that we serve within the city of Doraville. For 28 years, our organization was located in Doraville and have served the residents and continue to serve them to this day. We would like to make the public comment for the record and for you to take into serious consideration a redrawing of the proposed State House map regarding the city of Doraville. The proposed house map has Doraville split into 2 districts and has the upper part of Doraville from the northern side of Buford Highway placed in District 79 and the lower southern portion in District 81. The Buford Highway corridor in Doraville is a community of interest that encompasses many minority businesses, particularly Asian businesses, that share the same interests. By splitting Doraville in this manner, you'll be splitting this community and weakening its power. We also feel that the splitting of Doraville will hurt this municipality and that the portion that falls in District 79 will lose its voice in that district, which is almost, if not entirely, composed of the city of Dunwoody. So
Time, if you can wrap it up, please.
Yeah. Our clients and residents of Doraville have expressed displeasure with the map and feel by splitting Doraville, you will be essentially breaking up and destroying this community of interest. So we feel that the city of Doraville deserves fair and proper representation and will be best served by keeping the city intact and that it will be kept within District 81, thus keeping Doraville and Chambly together, which has had a history of being kept together. Thank you for the extra time and for your consideration.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to ask the court reporter if she would like for us to take a break. She's been there for over 3 hours, 4 hours now. Would you like for us? We'll take a 6-minute break, and we're going to try to wrap this up before 6 when we get back. So we want to move on.
Thank you. Ooh, can you hear me? Am I on? Okay.
You're turned on. I couldn't hear you, but.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of this Reapportionment Committee. I am Representative Yasmin Neal. I represent District 75. I'm offering to you substitute to the plan, House Proposition 1 substitute in reference to switching 2 whole precincts in my district to another 2.5 in another district. The numbers have been worked out by reapportionment. It's been drafted, and
okay.
That's it.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Representative Michelle Henson. You can either do it down here or at the podium if you want.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm one of the unfortunate ones who never had the opportunity to come in prior to this. One, I was out of town during the summer with my dad, who unfortunately just passed away. Secondly, I did check with your office, Mr. Chairman. I was told they weren't seeing people at present and I would be called back, and I really never did receive a phone call. And I had given my cell phone number. My secretary would certainly have informed me if the call had come in there. So I did try to set things up and certainly could have done some of this by telephone. My district, I've been representing it for over 20 years. And it's changed, of course, with redistricting and different ones. But it's been compact. It's involved Memorial Drive outside 285. And that is an area that's of great concern to many of us. That is the heart of DeKalb County. If you took a pin, put it on DeKalb County, that's the heart of it. Make no mistake. And we're in the process of a major revitalization, pulling people together, pulling neighborhoods together, forming a new business alliance. With the way the district has currently been done, it looks like it was totally gerrymandered to come down to South DeKalb, which is now included, which is a major interest. Central DeKalb, which has Memorial Drive, going up to North DeKalb, North Lake area, which is a totally another set of business interests and all, and even over to touching the Emory area. It's 4 competing areas. It's really an area that's next to impossible for a state representative with no resources, $7,000 spending allowance, no staff down at the Capitol, sharing a secretary with 5 people, to really be able to adequately do justice to representing all the diverse areas in the district. Those, I have a lot of other issues, but you're limiting us on time now, so I'm not going into that.
Appreciate it.
I do have just one request, and that's doing a substitute here for switching 1 precinct, that is the city of Pine Lake, back into what is my district. It has 900 people in it, roughly 300 voters in it, for a portion of Montreal, which already is a split precinct. It'd be switching it with 1 other state representative.
Okay.
Very small request. It's always been part of that area. It borders on Memorial Drive and is involved with the whole business interest of Memorial Drive.
Okay.
If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And who do I give these to?
Hand up here. Jeremy will come get him. Next will be Carlton Corbett. And on deck is Jimmy Carter. Wait a minute, let me turn you on, miss. Now try it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Carlton Corbett from Ware County. Come before you this evening just to speak on the division of my county. I'll remind you quickly that I met with you at one of the hearings in Savannah back in May. I made a plea for our county at that time that you leave us intact, or that we would have 1 representative. Once your maps come out, very disappointed that the voice and concern I shared it with you in Savannah was not listened or ignored to the extent that we've been sliced and diced up to about 3 representatives. And I'll just submit to you that I have not seen any of the Republican maps or the Democrat maps or invited to any of those meetings until the hearing and today. So I didn't have an inside track on anything. Also, just to let you know that I am the Ware County Republican chairman there, and before today, we was not aware that the Spencer bill was being proposed, but we adamantly support that, and I'm one man with one vote, and we need to have some weighted voice here at the Capitol.
We appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Jimmy Carter and Sandra Chapman on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make this as quick as possible and not repeat myself on what the Representative Hatfield and Spencer's already done. I just want to echo our support of their plan. I think it's a win-win for everybody concerned, and we don't need 3 or 4 reps. Sometimes you can be overserved, and we think we can do better with one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I've known you a long time. I don't believe you can be overserved.
Right. And most of the time when I'm up, it's always you asking the questions, and I have to say yes or no.
You had to say, yeah. It was a whole lot faster, wasn't it?
Thank you.
Sandra Chapman and Tommy Hatfield on deck.
Okay, I'm a teacher, a musician, a mother. That is what I want to talk to you about. My grandfather, when he was 95 years old, took the grandchildren around his bed because he was bedridden. And he told us how he got to Ware County, that he lived in Bullock County, and they had over 100 slaves, and he was the 23rd of 26 children living on the plantation. He was 7 years old. His daddy said that when Sherman came through, that when they heard the go work in the fields, and they had 20 wagons packed up to go, and that when they heard the cannons firing, to jump in the wagons because they were carrying the wagon train to a new county called Ware County. And it was a big swamp there, and they would never be able to find them all. And he said they were coming to Ware County. And my great-granddaddy said that he was so scared when he heard the cannons fire till his feet was just rooted to the ground. And one of his older brothers came by and grabbed him by the seat of his pants and threw him in the wagon. He said, "You stay there till you get to Ware County." And he said, "Yes, sir." And he stayed right there to Ware County. So when he got to Ware County, this is my great-granddaddy's name was William Griffin, and my great-granddaddy, was 95 years old, was Owen Alfred Griffin. And his descendants and all my people have been in Ware County for all that time. Gary Griffin, that works at the Waycross Journal-Herald, is a cousin. Cousins everywhere. I know my time is up, but I'm
being patient with you.
I know, but I want to preserve that specialty of Ware County and all the people working together, and I have done that for 60 years, and I thank you for considering keeping us one and not dividing us, because we all went together, we can all stay together. Thank you.
Thank you. Tommy Hatfield and then Representative Elena Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Tommy Hatfield. I'm a lawyer in Waycross. I'm first vice chair of the Ware County Republican Party. For the last 7 years, I've made my business in my law office to make sure that when redistricting came around, Representative Hatfield would still have a job. So he'll be all right, even if he doesn't have a district. But we want to make sure that he does. We're here to support him. He's been elected and reelected many, many times now in Ware County, and his values are our values. He is a reflection of all of Ware County, and we're an informed and an engaged electorate down there, and we demand that of him as well. The map that he has presented to you today, we wholeheartedly support that as an alternative. I know that this is a difficult process for the committee, and I know that there's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made. We think that they've done a lot of good work to make some compromises there. The map, though, as it is drawn, Ware County looks like a pizza pie, and we don't want to eat any pizza pie. And there's 3 representatives there. The city of Waycross would have 4. Unacceptable, but we do wholly support the alternative and respectfully ask that you will support excuse me, that map. Thank you.
Representative Parent and Randy Carter on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually here in the stead of Donna Pittman, the mayor of Doraville, who was here for many hours but unfortunately had to get back to urgent police business. she had come intending to present a unanimous resolution adopted by the Doraville City Council during their City Council meeting last night that I am now going to offer into the record, and it reads in very short, relevant part, now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of Doraville, Georgia, is of the collective consensus that the entire cities of Doraville and Chamblee represent communities of interest, and that it would be legally, politically, economically, and socially appropriate that the entire cities of Doraville and Chamblee remain in a single state house district, as they historically have been, adopted and effective this 15th day of August 2011. So if I could just, who should I give this to add it to the official record? Thank you so much. That's on behalf of Mayor Donna Pittman of Doraville.
Thank you, Representative. Randy Carter on deck. Deborah Giddens.
Randy Carter, Ware County, Georgia. I appreciate you being able to let me come up here and speak today. I'd like to say that I support the plan that Mark Hatfield is proposing. I hate to see our county chopped up into 4 different districts there. I've been fighting a landfill for 8 years. It sure is nice having a representative to come up here and do things we have done without having to go through 4 or 5 people or drive an hour or so one way or the other. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Deborah Giddens and Newton Bates on deck.
Deborah Giddens from Ware County, Georgia, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. After being here for several hours, I realize that you really do have a hard job in trying to draw these maps. So it's hard to please approximately 9 million Georgians and to make them happy. But at this point, the people of Ware County are less than happy with the current proposed maps that divides our county into 3 different districts. Down in Ware County, we feel that we are a population center, we're a retail center, we're an economic development center, and we feel that we need to have the opportunity to have a citizen from Ware County to represent us. We're seeking a win-win solution here regarding this issue of reapportionment, and we feel that a win-win solution can be found in this newly proposed House map for the counties in southeast Georgia. So I respectfully request your consideration of the newly proposed map. Thank you.
Thank you. Newton Bates and on deck F.A. Barrett.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, we certainly appreciate all the hard work y'all have done. I too was in Savannah back in May, and today I was happy to see that map that Jason and Mark had come up with, and I certainly hope that this committee will give it a lot of credence. It looks to be the one that we need. We don't need Ware County. With all due respect, Mr. Black, we don't need all these different representatives. And when we decide that Mark Hatfield's not the one to come up here, we'll vote him down. But right now, we're not going to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. F.A. Barrett on deck, Dave Walker.
Mr. Chairman, F.A. Barrett, Chairman of the Board of Election Registration in Ware County. I appreciate we endorse Mr. Hatfield's plan for the redistricting, and if you split us up like that, it's going to cause a nightmare for us and the elections department. Thank you, and appreciate you letting us speak.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Dave Walker and on deck Lee Thompson. Is Dave Walker still here? Lee Thompson. I don't see Dave Walker. And on deck would be John Eves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the hard work of this committee and you listening to me. I am here with a little bit different area of the state. I'm here on behalf of as a resident of Gwinnett County and particularly the city of Lawrenceville. And as a city of Lawrenceville resident for my entire life and practiced law there for 30 years, the map that you have, city of Lawrenceville is currently contained in one legislative district. It composes about 50% of that legislative district. There are 29,000 people in the city of Lawrenceville. It is 38% white, 31% African American, and 22% Hispanic. That city has been divided into 6 legislative districts. Downtown Lawrenceville is in the legislative district that extends into Hall County and includes the city of Flowery Branch in the same district. I might add that Gwinnett County is much the same way. Gwinnett County has gained over 200,000 people since the last census. It currently has 15 representatives, 11 of those completely within Gwinnett County. Under this new map, it will have 17 representatives, 10 completely in Gwinnett County, and 7 shared with other districts. I believe that that does not keep with your obligation for compactness, not splitting counties and not splitting precincts, and keeping communities of interest together. And I would also say, I know my time I would also say that every city in Gwinnett County, with the exception of Decula and Berkeley Lake, has also been divided in multiple districts. Lawrenceville the most, 6, but many of them into 2 and 3 districts. I would ask you to please look at that, and thank you.
Okay.
And I have a memo that I'd ask to be entered into the record.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, sir. John Eves and Kendra Calloway on deck.
Good afternoon. I'm Commissioner John Eves. I'm the chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, and I'm here today to offer my displeasure about the current map. I was elected to chairman of Fulton County 4 years ago with 60% of the votes of the county. I'm a Democrat, got reelected this past November with the same breakdown, 60%. Fulton County is a Democratic county. It's very diverse, racially, ethnicity-wise, socioeconomical-wise, but it is a Democratic county. Right now, with the current composition of the delegation, Fulton County is majority Democrat. With the new map, it's majority Republican. And I am very concerned, very troubled about the fact that there is a misalignment of the political will of the residents of Fulton County with the composition of the Fulton County delegation. I believe that if there are no modifications made, it's going to lead to greater polarization within our county, greater division within the county, also a misalignment between the will of the Fulton County Commission and the Fulton County delegation. So it is my hope that you will revisit the map, look especially to Fulton County, and what I see is a miscarriage of injustice or justice in terms of how this map has been configured to be Republican when the county is majority Democrat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Kendra Calloway and Bruce Gant, maybe? I can't read his handwriting. Kendra Calloway, Bruce Gant. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. Come on.
Yeah, no, I'm Bruce Gaunt. I was waiting
Gaunt.
for the other person to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a resident of the city of Atlanta in DeKalb County, and I'm a resident also of a Morningside Lenox Park neighborhood. And my concern with the map, in the past, our neighborhood, which included both, the city of Atlanta, but the DeKalb County portion and the Fulton County portion were all represented under the same district. As well as parts of Virginia Highland, which were communities of interest and are communities of interest. And my concern is that those are now split. We are with the DeKalb County portion is entirely in with DeKalb County into one of these long districts that goes all the way outside of 285. That's, you know, you've heard a lot of that today, and that's just a little bit more.
Okay, thanks. Jerry Gonzalez, and on deck, Dwayne Turner. Good to see you again.
Mr. Chairman, appreciate being here. First and foremost, my name is Jerry Gonzalez. I'm going to speak fast because of the only 1 minute. I represent Galeo. We're a nonpartisan organization, so we don't have a cat in the fight with regards to partisanship. I want to formally object to this 1 minute limitation. I represent 10% of the state's population. You're only giving me 1 minute. There's not enough time for full analysis of the map. Voting Rights Act doesn't only contain Section 2, it contains Section 5, which means that the state has a burden to prove that there is non-discrimination. There are this map that's been proposed at the House level, a systemic process to disenfranchise Latinos in the Lawrenceville, Chamblee, Doraville, Gainesville areas. There is anti-Latino bias in the state with our elected officials. Some are sitting in this committee right here. Representative Matt Ramsey led HB 87. Representative John Yates had a shoot-to-kill policy for the border control as a campaign promise that he was making. And you have with you a transcript of Senator Renee Unterman that I provided notified to all committee members of further anti-Latino bias. So again, I object to the 1 minute process. I object to this process, and there is a dilution of Latino voters all across the state that needs to be addressed, and by the Voting Rights Act, it must be protected.
Thank you.
And I'll entertain questions if there are any questions for specifics of those districts that I have.
Next be Dwayne Turner.
Any questions?
Thank you very much.
No questions?
No questions. Thank you.
I'll submit further written testimony as well for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Dwayne Turner and Greg McFarland on deck. Either one of those here?
My name's Greg McFarland. Thank you for the time to speak to you today. I want to speak on District 96, which is the Norcross area. The district has moved from where the railroad tracks run through Norcross over to Buford Highway from what it looks like. And I was just asking if you could take in consideration our little neighborhood, which is a part of the city of Norcross. I was on the LCI study and all the other investment studies we've done, that we could possibly be brought into the 95th district where we actually vote, which hopefully would help in some of the issues that we've had, because we basically had to form our own police precinct in our neighborhood to try to combat some of the issues. And the prime example is our representative isn't here now, which we've been trying to get some things done, and that we've actually been forgotten because we're surrounded by a commercial area and we don't have the representation that we would like to have as being a part of the whole city of Norcross proper in our little area. And that's the part that we've kind of, other issues we run into with them, is that we haven't been able to be representative for a long period of time because of the area of representation by the Congress. And if nothing else, we ask at least the Congress we might get some representation, if not on the local or scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina Perrin and Pierre Gaither. Maceo Williams. She gone? I'm sorry. Okay. William Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm William Perry. I'm with the Common Cause Georgia and representing the Georgia Redistricting Alliance, which includes Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and Georgia Women's Action for New Directions. As you know, we submitted throughout the process 5 principles for what we thought was fair, nonpartisan redistricting. You might be happy to hear that at first glance and at our first look at it, that you've satisfied 3 of the 5. The Senate beat you. They got 4 out of 5. But the 2 areas that we have particular concern with on our scale is, 1, the holding together of communities with geographic boundaries, county, cities, and communities of interest. We feel this map does not reach a good standard on that. And also the consideration of incumbency and party. We've heard all day long about this Democratic district and this Republican district, but rarely have we heard from the representatives anything about the people that comprise the districts and are ones that should choose whether or not they're a Democratic district or a Republican district. We asked several times about the splitting of counties. Rockdale County was a good example where they were split into 4 reps. Despite the fact of only having a population of 84,000, they're now split 6 ways in the House. Henry County was split 6 ways. It's now split 8 ways. And of their 8 districts, only 1 is completely encompassed in Henry County, despite an increase of about 74,000 people, which could certainly hold more districts within the county boundaries. So I appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman. I do hope that at some point we get more than 1 minute to comment, because it's been a long process, a lot to absorb, and we got a lot to say about it. Thank you,
Good
sir.
to see you again. Thanks a lot. Nick Gobler. He left. Donna Pittman. Dorothy Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This is my 3rd time to come before the committee. I was at 2 of the hearings, at which time I spoke about South Gwinnett. Also am in the League of Women Voters in the Democratic Party, but I'm representing myself when I'm talking about South Gwinnett. my question is, who was the person? It's become evident to me that it's really important for the person who draws the map to know something about the district that they're drawing. And what I wondered was, who was it that drew the South Gwinnett maps? Because we have been split, and I think I mentioned to you before that we have been split before and put into other counties. I'm a substitute teacher, and I go in the schools, and when I go in the schools, I see mostly brown faces. I substitute in Snellville and all of South Gwinnett, and I see the diverse population that we have there. Why don't we have enough people in South Gwinnett? And I had drawn a map to have a minority-majority district in South Gwinnett, because I look down and I see the way the maps are drawn. We're drawn with District 93 and 94 going down into DeKalb. If it was drawn east-west, west-east, then we would have a district of our own. Okay, so I would like your consideration on this. Even I haven't noticed even in the new Democratic map that I can tell that it's done that way. So I would really like your consideration for that, and I will submit a map if you'd like. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sherry Blackwood and Jeffrey Lamb on deck. Hey, Sherry.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters. I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking for myself as a resident of Gwinnett County. I would like to ask a question. How many majority-minority districts are there in Gwinnett County in this map?
I don't recall the exact number. 49
No,
statewide.
I mean in Gwinnett
Within
County.
Gwinnett County. I don't know off the top of my head.
No, that touch Gwinnett County.
He can get that for you.
Majority, minority.
Well, he gets that for you.
Okay.
What was it?
Okay.
Was that your concern?
My concern is that Gwinnett County is now, when you count the Hispanic vote, which is a language, so that would be considered in the minority, it is now a majority-minority county, and our representatives should represent that.
Well, there is a majority-minority Hispanic district created in our map in Gwinnett County.
I understand that, but the entire county is majority-minority.
We didn't create one for the whole county, but we do have one created in there.
But if you have 17 districts, 17 representatives, and only one is in a majority-minority district, then we have a problem in Gwinnett County because it is a majority-minority county.
Well, we just disagree on that, but I appreciate your input on it. I appreciate your input on it.
You disagree about what part?
I'm not going to debate you on it.
You disagree that it's a majority-minority county?
Are you finished?
I just want to know. It is a majority-minority county. We need more than one majority-minority voting district in Gwinnett County.
I appreciate
Thank you.
Appreciate your input on it. Jeffrey Lamb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am the president of the Atlanta Downtown Neighborhood Association, the neighborhood that we're in, and a lot of people don't realize that people actually live within a 1 mile radius of here. But as it stands right now, we are totally encompassed in District 56. Your proposed map splits us east-west, bordering 57 and 58. I respectfully request that that our neighborhood, our community of interest, be preserved. The eastern border of our neighborhood is the I-75-85 connector, the Grady Curve. So if you could preserve our community interest, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Micah Rowland. Not here. Okay, that will terminate the public comment section of our meeting. I would like to remind everybody that you can still go online. You can still post your comments and tell us what you think about the maps. This is a process that will be ongoing. It's a legislative process, so it's got a ways to go before it gets to the governor's office, and you can post comments. We appreciate everybody being here. At this time, are there any motions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move do pass the substitute offered by Chairman Lane to HB 1EX, which is LC 285805S.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any substitute motions? I'm sorry, I didn't see you down there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll put my numbers on. My substitute is HB1EX. Okay, my substitute is HB1EX LC 371269S.
Okay, have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and second on substitute. Are there any other substitutes? I'll tell you what, I think before we go there, maybe we'll move on to one. Well, go ahead. Punch your button again. I turned you off. Now.
I have a substitute to House Bill 1EX, LC 371271S, as offered by Representative Michelle Henson. By me, vote for her. It's a substitute. It's a substitute.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Any other motions for substitutions? Okay, we'll take up the first motion as a substitute. HB1EX LC 37127. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry, that was already not seconded. HB1EX LC 371269S. It's a Beasley-Teague motion. All in favor of that substitute, raise your hand. All opposed, like sign. Substitute fails. Now on the main motion for House Bill 1EX, all in favor of that motion, raise your right hand. All opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Yes, ma'am, Representative.
What is black combo?
What is what?
What is black combo? On the headings of these things, it has.
I think that's where, in a census, when they take the numbers, that's where someone contends that they're part black, maybe not completely black population, but have multiracial, with part of that being African American. That's my understanding of that. Am I getting that right?
Okay.
Okay.
I was just go to restaurants and they tell me.
You always liven things up. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate your patience and appreciate the committee's indulgence in a long afternoon. Thank you very much.